TMSV, Thomas Rawls. How do you pronounce your surname?
Yeah, that's pretty much perfect. It's
Rawls.
rules, so
Rules.
like an ooh sound. Yeah,
Oh, right. Breaking the rules.
exactly.
Good stuff. Um, so yeah, man, what's been going on?
I mean, I've been sitting inside editing audiobooks and making tunes for like the past few months.
Awesome.
Because I heard there's been a big thing going on outside with a virus and stuff, but
Yeah.
don't
So
these days.
yeah. I mean, not much change then.
Not really, no. I mean, no.
Just
Like I can do everything from home basically, even more now than before actually. So
what?
yeah, it's just
What do you mean
so
more so than before? What do you mean? Like because more other people are doing stuff online, or
that in part I guess, but I did this sort of like studio product specialist slash customer service job for a while for this big music gear shop, and they had me going into the office like a few times a month, and like as soon as the outbreak hit, then I got to work from home, and now I don't do that job anymore, and I just do audio editing and music at the moment. So like I don't have to leave the house at
perfect,
all. Yeah.
perfect. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like the future of well, I think anyway, the future is just going to be remote working where you can possibly, because everything will be
Yeah.
automated. All the like, you know, all the sort of outdoor stuff will be automated, and we can just sit indoors on our screens. Oh God,
It,
that sounds really bad now.
it sounds sort of depressing. On the other hand, though, if we move to a not to get too deep into this kind of stuff, unless you want to, of course, but if we
I'm
move
happy
more
to,
and more
mate.
towards like a post-work society, then getting to do everything from home and then choosing to do with your time, starting from home whenever you're done working for the day, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, also like, it means that people aren't like where we are in London. It will take you an hour to get to work. It basically takes you an hour to get anywhere in London, like
Right.
regardless. Um, and so if 2 hours of your day is taken up sitting on public transport or in a traffic jam or whatever,
Yeah.
then that's like, if you work from home, then immediately you're making like an extra 10 hours in the work week for yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. That's 10 hours.
It's a lot of it's a lot of time,
That's crazy.
you know. So and I think a lot of jobs don't need people in offices all the time, you know? Like people will go into an office, sit at their desk in front of their screen and not talk to anyone. They will
Right.
just have like, the occasional conversation about nothing over coffee, but anything work related will come through an email. Even if the person is in the same building, they're not going to bother getting up from their desk to come and talk to you about it. They'll just send you an email, be like, I need this or whatever.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
I mean, it'd be good to get to see other people, or to be actually to be forced to see and to interact with other people. I think is a
yeah,
healthy aspect of traditional work. Something that I feel like if I go too long without you know interpersonal contact with in a professional sense, then
totally.
I sort of go crazy without realizing it.
Mm.
So I think that is healthy, and there should be something, something that isn't video calls and stuff to maybe fill in that gap.
Yeah, but then you can sort of have physical socializing that isn't just work related constantly,
Right,
or
exactly. Yeah.
being like stuck next to someone who stinks on public transport or whatever. Like you can you can just choose who you want to hang out with and hang out with them rather than like being forced into a sort of awkward social context, I
Yeah,
guess.
yeah, absolutely. as long as the free time that everyone would get, like not having to get to work and stuff, as long as that isn't to be filled with, extra time for productivity.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, that's the thing, that it would inevitably be that, isn't it? Like, oh yeah, well, now that you've freed up 2 hours, you can spend more time working from home. I found that, like, I feel when I think about the sort of modern history and the way that up until maybe Second World War, it was, you had one breadwinner in each household, and it
Right.
was, and because the man was the only one who was allowed to work or whatever. I feel like there would have been enough of a salary to for one person to pay for the household, whereas now you're expected to have two people working in each household, and that is just enough salary for the household. So it's effectively like
Exactly.
halved the salaries.
And if you can't get a decent mortgage, you should like stop eating avocado on toast. I think it's
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
yeah. But
that's the answer.
it all moves in one direction, and like this isn't like a big like this shouldn't be new information to a lot of people, hopefully, but like the way the world is moving and has been moving for decades now is, if you have time to spare, then that will go into being productive in some sense, whether that is work or being, physically or mentally healthy enough to be as productive as possible at work.
Yeah, yeah. So many extra demands on your free time. Like now that you can do everything faster and more efficiently, it just means you have to do more.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't seem like very rich people have been getting very much very richer,
Yeah,
to put
yeah.
it in the most poetic way I can think of.
Very much, very richer.
Exactly. And
You'll have to unpick that sentence for me.
I mean, like, there doesn't seem to be like this big crisis where we have to put in more and more man hours. It's just more like that, you know, at a certain point, it's diminishing returns, and you just have to sort of push the brakes and say, like, hey, maybe we should all work a bit less and just enjoy all the luxury and free time and
Well,
the automation we've introduced into our lives, and just stop spending so much time making shit that nobody needs.
and then yeah, 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 and I'm sure that if you took that argument to the CEO of whatever the company is, say, hey, maybe we could just earn the same amount, but just work a bit less. We can do it, and
Yeah,
they'd be like,
impossible.
why would I do that? You
Right,
mean
exactly. Yeah.
not earn more money? No. But yeah, there was that thing. Wasn't there like an experiment in was it Japan or somewhere that they reduced the working week to 4 days instead of five, and then productivity went up
Yeah.
because people had like more free time, and it meant that they could focus more when they were working. I guess I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it that seems pretty logical. Like, if you don't force people to work on Fridays and let them have Fridays off, then the rest of the week they'll probably do more and better work, right?
Yeah, you'd think. I mean, I remember my first experience of working in an office. I had a work experience placement in a design agency in London in sort of central, and
Mhm.
one of the one of the women who worked there, I don't. She just was reading articles on like blogs the entire day, every day for the whole week.
Yeah.
I didn't see her do one bit of work. I don't know what her job position was. Maybe her job was to like read loads of stuff, but it just seemed like she just didn't do anything all week, and like
Right.
it was just
Does the
weird.
agency still exist?
Well, no, probably not. Yeah. uh,
I mean, I'd venture a guess and say it probably does, or she wasn't the reason that it doesn't exist again.
no, maybe yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it just seemed like there's a lot of like grifting happening, and it's not because it's not bad. It just means that there's like people are just sort of they would rather go into work and sit at a desk and scroll through Facebook all day, or at least the company they work for would rather that they come in to work and sit and do nothing than let them have a day off. Do you know what I
Right.
mean? Or like
Yeah,
try and
exactly.
organize the resources better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just yeah, it doesn't seem very smart,
No.
you know.
But I think maybe like new industries are better at that. Like, you know, if you're sort of working for like a digital startup, I imagine you do a lot of working from home or a lot of remote working and a lot of, you know, you'll have meetings over Skype. You won't have or Zoom. You won't have meetings in a big old office round a big table. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but like still it still moves in that direction where like yeah, you have the freedom to work from wherever you want and there's fewer meetings that don't make sense where you're like spending an hour talking about nothing.
Exactly.
And, and then like all that time has to filled up with putting time into the startup or into the work.
Yeah, yeah. I suppose it's yeah, six of one, half a dozen of the other.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there's a lot of radical theories about this that I don't think I should be going into right now because I'm not as well read as I let people think I am.
Haven't you've recently done a degree in what was it? You did like a law. You studied some international law.
Yes, yeah. I studied law and then like my bachelor's was law, just Dutch law, and then my master's was in public international law, which turned out to be the least employable law master's degree and like overall number three in the least employable master's degrees in the Netherlands. So,
Oh no.
but I mean, it was good. I'm glad I did it, except for the like the student debt kind of
Oh
thing. But
boy, yeah.
yeah, no, I'm glad I was fortunate enough to sort of stumble my way through that whole experience, and now I know I did it, and I don't have to feel like I missed out on that, I guess.
And does it like help you as an individual navigating sort of what you know your rights etc. Is that one?
I do feel like I have so when you study law, it's more of a way of thinking and a way of researching, and they teach you more than it is knowledge. So I never make any big sweeping statements about someone's rights, and I'm always like, I'll try and look that up for you if they ask me a question or if I have a problem of my own. And I feel like I'm well equipped to sort of analyze situations in a way where I can then turn that into certain questions that I have to find the answer to be able to ascertain like what someone's rights are or what they should do to get out of a sticky situation with like their landlord or whatever or their employer.
Right, but I guess they wouldn't employ you to do that for them. That's more of a like, hi mate, can you help me with, you know, in logic when you that kind of thing.
I mean, yeah, it is sort of the um, it was actually funny. So I did this. It was basically customer service, the job I was working for
Right.
the past 6 or so months. Um, there was a lot of stuff that was like, what mic should I buy or how does this or that work and where should I start, which was the fun part. And then there was where is my fucking package I've been waiting for 2 months. And it did feel like a lot of the time I wasn't intimidated by people threatening legal action. That is one thing, but also a lot of problems were easily like divided into chunks that I could then solve for them in a way that was satisfying for like both the company and the customer.
Right.
So that like in a weird way, in a very expensive roundabout way, the law degree does help in entirely different situations.
Yeah.
People just need help and need some compartmentalization of information, about something that they don't know anything about, basically.
Right. Right. Do you think it's helped you um, with sort of coming to terms with the chemical records debacle? Or do you think it's
Uh, the point at which that happened, I wasn't. I feel like back then I wasn't even like a fully functional adult, basically.
sure?
I mean, I was like 24, 25 years old when the whole thing went down. But like I didn't pay all that much attention to it, and I just felt like well, yeah, I mean, as you just said, it was a coming to terms kind of thing, and that was basically everything. It was like I got the after a while I got that letter from the law firm that was handling it.
Right.
Basically, I was just like, I'm not going to expect anything because I'm at the very bottom of the list of people
Of,
that
of
get
course.
money from them. So like, I might as well just ignore most of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's it.
I mean, that's
How are you looking at that these days?
well. I mean, yeah. Like it's just another one of those things that you kind of you just write off to experience. I think at the time I was pretty incensed about the whole thing because we were well, the way that it happened for Ryan and myself was that we were midway through an American tour, touring the first Author album, and then we had lined up the second album with Black Box, and PR was sort of asking about the guy who was handling the PR for it was sort of asking about release dates and stuff, and we were sort of in conversation mid like halfway through the tour, and then we got like an email from him saying, guys, no one is going to take this, as in like no blogs or press are going to take this album because it's already released. And that was the first we heard, and we thought, what? How has it been already released? The vinyl isn't. It was supposed to be released on vinyl and then have like maybe a month of vinyl only, or a couple of weeks at least, and then the digital. And the vinyl hadn't even gone to press, so it would have been like a good 3 or 4 months until we got the vinyl back. So it just didn't make any sense to us. And he said, yeah, the MP3s have been released already. So obviously you can't get any press because people want exclusives and and advanced promos and da da da. If it's already out, they're not going to be interested.
Right.
Um, and
Which in
so
itself is like is insane bullshit. But continue.
yeah, exactly. Which is yeah, but then if you could review anything that was already out, then you've at least if you're only reviewing stuff that's about to come out, that's like narrows down what you can write about a certain amount. So, but yeah, like that was our first sort of inkling that something had gone down. And obviously, you're halfway through a tour, the other side of the world. You can't do much about it, and no one was responding to emails. And basically, that was it. And we were like, oh well, the second album is completely tanked, and loads of people didn't even know that it had come out. Even years after the fact.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, and then it was just sort of just trying to chase people down and find out what happened, and then it turned out that basically because of going into administration, the powers that be had decided, well, we need to shift any stock that we have and try and create as much income as possible to pay off the debts or whatever.
Yeah.
And so our album became a digital means of making money for them immediately. So they were just like, right, let's press go on that, and
Right.
it was out, and obviously that basically meant, well, it didn't do any sales because there was no press. So yeah, it was kind of a bit stupid. But then since obviously we've had our masters back and everything else, and we've re-released with Ryan's label, and that's all fine. But yeah, it was a very strange time. Uh, but yeah, I mean, the niche electronic music scene. It's just another day in the life, really, isn't it? In terms of like,
Yeah.
oh, I never got paid for this release. Is it worth? Is it worth even trying to get paid for it? Because after costs, after oh well, we spent all this money on press, and we spent all this money on pressing vinyl, and various miscellaneous. Um, so yeah, there's nothing left basically, or if anything,
Exactly.
the artist owes the label money.
Exactly. And you might as well put all the hours you would have chased them into making new music that you
Exactly.
paid for. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, I've changed my attitude towards it recently because um, I basically wanted to move away from live gigs because
Mhm.
I'm not a confident flyer to begin with,
Right.
and also just the whole sort of my sleep routine was basically, if you're playing every weekend or even a few times a month, you get into like that late night um, sort of routine where it's like you go to bed at 2, 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, because you've been playing gigs late at night,
Yeah.
and then you're getting up at 12, 1 o'clock in the afternoon. You're missing most of the day, and then if you're not playing gigs, you're making music till 2, 3, 4 in the morning, and I was finding that whole routine for me was just pretty horrible, and I was getting like, you know, really, like, I think it's not good for your mental health to start with. Plus, you've got the fact that like when you are at a gig, you're basically only working for an hour, and unless you can time it so that you turn up, play your hour, and get straight off with no socializing, no drinking, no partying, no anything, then essentially, like, and that's pretty soul destroying by itself if you even just do that. But then
Yeah.
if you don't do that and you do turn up to sound check at before the doors are open, to have conversations with promoters, with other producers, and and have a drink, and whatever else, then you're basically ruining your liver every weekend. And I don't really go out normally. I never went to festivals before I started playing them.
Right.
I'm not that much of like an extrovert, like, well, not that you have to be an extrovert, but like I would. So when I was a student, we used to go to like house parties and stuff and try and get on the decks, and take records around and whatever. But I wouldn't have been at those house parties if I wasn't just waiting to play. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's kind of, there was only, you're like tunnel visioned. You're like, I just want to play music and chat to other people about music, and that's it. Like, I'm not here to party. Um, which and no offense to anyone who was partying, like that's the whole point. You're supposed to party, but I just felt really awkward partying I just wanted to play records, you know.
Right. Yeah.
And
Yeah. Let's. I mean, if it isn't clear already, we're the weird ones.
yeah, yeah.
To parties to do a thing we would like to do, and then
Yeah, totally. It's like,
few people as possible.
yeah, and if you look at it as work, it's like, oh, so you go to parties to do work.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's yeah, it's quite odd, I guess.
Have you ever gotten the feeling that people didn't take like your professionalism too well, where you just go in and out, or just make sure you don't drink too much or don't socialize all that much, or maybe walk in late into the club because you took a nap at the hotel or whatever? Do you ever get the feeling that promoters and punters resent
There's
that?
there was I don't know if I was resented for it because I guess you don't see that if they do. You know
Yeah.
you'd get they would might talk about me once I've left or whatever, but you definitely I definitely was like expected to do things. You know, like
Yeah.
you kind of you turn up and then you're expected to get involved because it's the you know if you're a promoter in a small town somewhere and you've booked an artist uh, to come from where it's like a big event for you, right? And you've like you spent however many weeks promoting it. You've put loads of effort into getting everyone down, and it's like, yes, this is the culmination of all my work, and this is going to be an amazing party, and I'm so excited, and I can't wait to party with the guy that I've booked or the female DJ or whatever it is, like whoever the act is or the band. And you get a lot of that when you turn up to gigs, that there's like that expectation because it's like, oh, you're here, you're now on the level that I'm on, and we can have a party together. Whereas a lot of time
Yeah.
you just want to turn up, do your job, and move on. And that maybe, yeah, I sensed a bit of a disappointment. Perhaps I never received any backlash for it, but definitely there's like an air of sort of like expectancy to be as enthusiastic about the party. And maybe if I was more of an extrovert, then I would be, and I might have lasted longer in the sort of DJ community. But
Yeah, it is a very extroverted people that seem to tour the most as well.
totally.
It's like, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, you look at like so like for instance, Outlook Festival. I saw Goldie, who I mean, you talk about like OGs of the scene. Like, he doesn't get much more OG than Goldie, but then
right.
he's there having a great time, having a party. He's got his own label that's doing a showcase on a stage, and he's like partying with all the DJs who are there playing, tunes that are coming out on his label or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Great, but he's also a massive extrovert. So, like, or at least that's the impression I get. I don't know, maybe he's not, but like, the impression I definitely get from him is like, he's like a larger than life character, whereas someone who spends all day locked away in their studio in a dark room making noises, not speaking to many people, is kind of maybe less of an extrovert than that. I don't know.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people who organize night like promoters, they just know your sort of public persona. And
Yeah.
a feeling I get, and like that's something that I probably that's an inherent assumption in how I view other people as well, is like if someone has press pics or does interviews or whatever, I feel like they're in control of that sort of thing, and they're extroverted, and they can keep up with the whole lifestyle of the whole thing.
It's
And
interesting you said press pics is like if someone, because there's so much expectancy from everywhere. From if you want press, they go, well, where's your press shot? Where's your press pick?
Yeah.
And if you don't really like, I always found that super awkward. The whole like, because with Submotion, like we every time we had a new release coming out, well, we have to have a new photo shoot. And I'm like, no, I haven't changed that much. Can you not just use an old picture? I don't. Like, what have we got to do? Is stand around looking awkward in like a abandoned warehouse, like or something like.
Right, right. I know.
It's just like, oh,
This example of those is metal bands where there's like you have the front man and maybe like the lead guitarist and they look all hard and metal, and then there's the drummer and a bassist in the background who just look like regular guys with long hair and you know
yeah, it's just sort of music.
awkward personality.
Yeah, it's like a couple of music enthusiasts in the background who just kind of like tore themselves away from their hi-fi or whatever.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. And you can just, there's I think a good photographer can, especially when it's a shot of a solo artist, they can mask that pretty well. But there's people who
Mm.
you can view from a distance on whatever medium that they have no idea what to do with their hands.
Yeah, totally.
It's very funny to me.
And I mean, I had one horrific photo shoot back in the day with a friend of mine,
Mhm.
where we did the classic thing. We went to an old warehouse venue. It was this place called Beaverworks in Leeds, and there's like this big like industrial fan and all this other stuff, like all these like industrial looking things in there. Did a
Yeah.
bunch of photos there, but I couldn't help like taking the piss and just sort of, doing like pointing at the camera and like doing stupid poses. And the worst thing is, some of that is now online and people have used those pictures.
Wait, so it's online, like you posted it as a joke?
No, I didn't post it. I think he might have used it, or he's like, or maybe it was like on my MySpace, like back in the day, just for as a laugh, like, haha, did a photo shoot, lol. Yeah, and then people have found those images, Google searched me or whatever.
Yeah.
For instance, this picture in, so the chat has basically taken an old photo shoot of mine,
Uh-huh. Hey, what's
and
up, Super Zero?
Super Zero has posted that face is from that photo shoot, I think. And yeah, so like, just I don't know, and that's of course the image they've used.
New tab. It's nicely stretched as well. This is great. Zooming it in and out. When was
It's awful.
this taken? You were
Oh
talking about
yeah,
MySpace.
yeah, it would have been back in those days, like 2004. I don't know. I don't know when it was. Um, but yeah, yeah. There's a couple of people who are watching, but I'm not seeing any. It says that there's no viewers, so that's quite weird. I think it's the restream thing just messing up. I might refresh it.
Oh yeah. I kind of trained myself to not pay attention to how many people are.
No, I think it's all nonsense anyway. To be honest, I don't think it's actually working. Um, but yeah, I mean, as long as there's people talking in the chat room, then it's fine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, it's not even loading now. God damn it! Here we go. Right. Um, oh right, now it's fine. It's 8. That's good.
All right.
So, have you got any sort of plans? Have you got anything coming up?
Yeah, I have a few things coming up. One is one of those things where I can't talk about it that much
Sure.
yet
Right.
at all. But there's some pretty exciting music coming out through an exciting label.
Is it a new label or
No, it's a pretty old label.
right?
Yeah, it's a label that that has been planning to release my music for a full decade now. So I'm glad it's finally happening.
Okay,
Uh,
that's a clue, is it? Are they notorious for releasing things decades after they say they're going to release them?
no comment.
Okay, all right.
And I'm planning to. I released two albums so far this year and a few EPs, and I would like to maybe do two more albums. One of which would be coming out through Perfect Records, which is my label that I released only two things on so far.
Cool.
In 2016 and 17, I think.
So it's quite a bold claim for a record label name. You just went straight off perfect. I mean,
Yeah, the whole thing was like the whole sound is supposed to be based on like imperfect sources like dusty samples and
right? Yeah, 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 yeah.
so
So it's like an ironic name or like a sarcastic
yeah,
name.
yeah, sort of. It's more like um yeah, I guess that's it. It's like the feeling I had when I named it was whenever you look at like really old tech, like really old consumer electronics, for example,
Mm,
like an ad for a Walkman or something,
mm.
and it's like this is the sickest shit in the history of the world, and now we look back at that and it's like, yeah, that was cool when it happened,
Yeah, yeah,
and now it's like in black and white and it sucks and
yeah.
we don't use it anymore. So like it's just sort of ironic in that way where it's
Ultra high definition. Yeah, yeah,
right, exactly,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And if I look at, I have this tape deck set up, and if I look at that and it says like Dolby noise suppression, mega quality, it's like that's quaint to me, and it feels
yeah.
like right. So
So
I don't expect that to sound good at all, but I do expect it to have a certain character to it.
yeah, yeah. Do you think? Do you think that? So all right. So on a similar tip, I don't want to get really into it, but what's your position on the whole like playing 320 MP3s out in a venue and that sort of thing versus WAV
Oh, I've
or
posted about this
FLAC?
in the past, and people have there have
Everyone's
been
got an opinion.
debate. Everyone's got an opinion, and there has been quite some discussion on my social channels about it after I posted it. I don't actually believe that people can tell the difference, um, but there's people who insist they do. So I'll just have to maybe do a double blind test, especially in a club environment. The thing is, though, like if you have super high quality, like a listening environment or headphones or whatever,
Mm.
and you're able to tell the difference, you know, sure, why not? But I think in most club environments, I I don't think it matters at all. I feel like 320 is more than enough.
Um, I would sort of add to that essentially if you're mixing stuff that isn't locked at zero and if
Right.
there are varying tempos, you're basically relying on the whatever the algorithm is inside the CDJ or the XDJ or whatever it is
Yeah.
to time slash pitch shift the digital format anyway.
Yeah.
So you're not like surely it wouldn't make much of a difference if you're like having to use a pitch shift. That's already changing the fidelity of the audio,
Yeah, but it's like, does it?
or does it? Maybe not.
Right, because I don't know how that works. Does it take the audio that's in the CDJ's buffer and stretch that? Because then it wouldn't really matter what quality it is if it sounds similar, I guess.
Mm.
But if it takes grains from like a wave file,
We'll have to get someone from Pioneer to have a conversation with them about that. But yeah,
I look it up myself. Just
um,
not going to do that.
no, no. So from my experience, I played in a there was a venue in Bath. I can't remember what it was called, but someone came up to me after my set, and I'd been playing pretty much like I think probably MP3s all the way through.
Hmm.
And he came up to me, he was like, I can tell that you were only playing WAVs. That just the fidelity of the set. I was like, yeah, mate. Yeah. It's really noticeable, isn't it? Like
Right, exactly.
cool.
I know why you did that because you did
You
what
don't want to. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Especially if someone like I find that when people are belligerent about it, that it's just they're not someone that you want to have a conversation with.
right. Yeah, those are not the people and not the subjects I want to like.
Yeah.
I enjoy talking about that kind of stuff to a person like yourself because I know that you know what you're talking about. But like, if someone is like,
Well,
I, I,
not like someone who works at Pioneer, but yeah.
right. But you have enough experience, and I know that you're not going to tell me that you can feel the difference
Yeah.
somehow
Yeah.
because that's what you.
There's so many variables. Like the fact that I mean, it constantly gets to me that venues don't invest in acoustic treatment. Like, how is that? How is that a thing? Some of the greatest clubs around the world don't have any acoustic treatment. What, you think you can just put a sound system in and it's not going to sound like arse? Like,
Yeah,
do you
but
know?
it's function one, man. So
Oh, your function. Yeah. Oh.
empty swimming pool, like an Olympic swimming pool, and it's gonna sound like shit, but nobody thinks about that. I
Totally.
guess.
And the thing is, I bought into that when I was younger. Like, because you're constantly told, oh yeah, the best sound system and the best this and that, and then you start working as a sound engineer in these venues, and it's like you've got an air duct above your head that's like rattling every time there's like an F in the bass. It's like, like how do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. It's for me, it's the worst when I actually when I'm playing and I can't hear what's happening,
Mm.
which often is
And
more of an issue.
you've got like this speaker this close to your face, like cranked, and it's just like a mushy mess. Yeah.
Right, yeah, and yeah, that has to be the acoustics of the venue, right?
Yeah.
That has to just like waves flying in and out, canceling each other out
Of
and stuff.
course. Yeah.
It shouldn't be that difficult to just, at least maybe put some foam on the ceiling just as a
Just something. Yeah. I mean, I remember what's it? Is it Volks in Brighton? There's like a quite a well used venue because it's quite small, so you can have like quite niche stuff in there. And they put in a big old sound system when I played there, and there's like literally maybe I don't know, maybe 10 meters deep, and this huge sound system blasting at maybe sort of 20 people front to back. If you sort of if you stood in a line, it's maybe 20 people deep, and then there's some like fire doors at the back. So they're like concentrating all this bass on a couple of fire doors that are a bit knackered, and they're just like every tune sounds like.
we have the deputy manager at Volks in the chat, by the way.
Oh no! Oh dear. But anyway, get some acoustic treatment, sort out those doors. But yeah, it's a thing, and obviously I know that a lot of venues are basically, operating on a skeleton budget. They can just about afford to keep going, and so existing venues I can understand why they don't have the money to put into acoustic treatment, but when you're building a new venue or a new music venue, like what why is it somewhere like if you're going to have an orchestra,
Hmm.
then they spend so much time. You look at like the South Bank, like the Barbican stage or whatever. When it's sort of acceptable music or like establishment music, they can
Right.
put all this funding and money into like acoustic treatment. They get the best, architects involved and whatever, and this is like was built what 30, 40 years ago. But now, even if there's a new venue, if it's a club, if it's for electronic music, it's like, oh, just stick a sound system in. Don't, you know.
Yeah, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that like dance music, electronic music, venues like that, it's all pretty DIY, and I feel like there's so many people who feel like they know what they're doing, that it's pretty much not done to invest in like an external party to get that whole thing set up. Does that
Mm,
make sense?
yeah, totally. And I feel like it's maybe because it's not, um, clubbing or like raving is seen as, oh, you just stick a sound system in the woods and like it's not really the venue isn't important.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, woods are gonna sound better than a lot.
well, yeah, yeah, that's it. But like, I guess there's like an attitude that, oh, it doesn't matter. Everyone will be off their face anyway. No one can tell the difference, and it's all just boom, boom, boom anyway. So, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I
Whereas
mean that is often the case, especially when it's
maybe
really loud. Like,
or psytrance, yeah.
yeah, I mean that it doesn't really matter at what volume you play psytrance. Like, it's gonna be shit anyway, right?
Yeah, 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 that's it. Oh man, I had one guy. So I was doing some tutorials for uh, a couple of colleges who were sort of sending me their master's students to
Okay.
the studio to like get tips on mixing and stuff. And one of the guys, so what the first guy who turned up was like he had a project for a band and he wanted to know how best to like, he had recorded it all. There was all the all the various drum mics and everything else. Um, and then and then the next person who came was a singer songwriter who wanted help with writing songs, and I
Right.
sort of said, well, that's not. I mean, I've written some songs, but I wouldn't say I'm a songwriter. It's not really my sort of level, especially with teaching and stuff. And also, she wanted to write songs in because she was Ukrainian, I think, and all her songs, all her lyrics were Ukrainian lyrics.
Right.
Wanted some help
Yeah, right.
because obviously, yeah, what? So that was weird. And then the next guy who came was a psytrance producer and wanted me to help him make psytrance or like to mix his psytrance. And it was like, I mean, what, it's like a kick drum and some like pads. He was like, I want to sound like this. It's like, yeah, you do. It's nothing I can add to this.
Right, exactly.
There's
Yeah, I
nothing
mean,
to it.
maybe bypass it more.
Yeah,
That's it.
I don't know. Make the kick drum louder. Yeah. So
Make
yeah,
the drum more zippy and yeah.
yeah. It was weird. But yeah, that was sort of my experience of psytrance anyway.
Yeah, luckily I don't have all that much. Yeah, more resonance on the kick. That's it. Super.
That's it. That's it. Mr. McChickeno, can I get feedback on my mixing and overall project? I mean, yeah, sure. Like, send it through. But I won't be able to do that right now. Um, so what you were talking about, like the lo-fi sort of stuff. There's a free drum kit called Old Tape Drums. I don't know if you've seen this.
Oh, right. I just bought complete. So
Oh, Wicked in the sales,
no,
the Native Instrument
I
sales.
had like the complete that came with machine.
Right.
Bought that years ago, so I just bought the update. I wanted to get the Transient Master plugin.
Ah, right.
Amazing.
Yeah, that's super
That was
cool.
€100, and the upgrade from my version of Complete was 200. So might as well do that.
Fair enough. Yeah, and that comes with loads of stuff as well, like all
Yeah,
the contact instruments. So,
yeah, way too much for my hard drive right now. So I need to
fair.
invest in a hard drive now as well.
Oh man, Samsung T5 SSD. It's the nugget. I've got all of my contact instruments on my external Samsung, and it's just lightning fast.
Sure. Right.
Yeah, and you just run. Yeah, I've just got like all of that on there, and you can load it up, and it's lightning fast.
So, do you have the 1 terabyte one or the 500 GB?
Terabyte.
Right.
Yeah.
Nice.
Just because I need space. I've got too many instruments. I've got like a load of Spitfire. Do you know Spitfire audio stuff?
Yeah.
So I got a load of that. And also I've been looking into like free libraries. There's some pretty cool things if you look around. So there's this. This is sort of like it's quite weird. It's got like the tape sounds. So like the play and the stop. Where is it? Oh, am I even? No. There we go. Arm it. So you can like,
See if that. Oh yeah, yeah. This is.
and then you can press all the buttons, the play and the stop and the rewind and everything. Are you getting that?
Okay, so it's a MIDI controlled tape deck,
Yeah.
basically. Yeah.
If you click on it, it says you you can't use a pencil because it's digital. Sorry. You know when you used to like put a pencil through the thing.
That sucks.
It's really good. So then when you press play, it has the play button, and then it has all this like hiss, so you can like add that in, and then like filter that. You can also change the speed, aka the pitch of the drums. So I made like a little beat, and they're really knackered old.
Wait, nothing's coming through right now. I'm gonna refresh the.
The listen to. Do you need a new link or something?
No, because the bar is coming up still. I just need to make sure that. One sec. I'll be right back. Then I'm gonna fix this.
Sure. I'll send you another link anyway, and then it might be the same.
All right, be right back.
Cool. So yeah, so we're using audio movers to transmit the audio to him. I might try and just make that a bit more. The stream is lagging. There's something going on there. No dropped frames. I think that'll be your end, mate. Sorry. Anyone else having? Yeah, Desi, I think it's whatever's going on at your end. Right, I'm just gonna copy this, and I want I'm just gonna have the play. And then I'm gonna do stop everything and have a little. Yeah, so this is free. It's like it's by Waves Factory. I don't know if you can. It's called Old Tape Drums. It doesn't seem to come up as like a. Wow, you can really time stretch it.
Hello.
Yo,
Yo.
can you hear it?
I think it's only coming through. Oh wait, I'm gonna open the new link. 1 second.
Yeah, I just sent you the link again.
Yeah.
I'm just going to open a window.
Why is this not?
Are you getting that?
It's either coming in very quietly through. Oh, there we go. My Windows mixer is all confused. But... Yeah. Nice. It's kind of weird because it's so lo-fi that I'm not entirely sure if this is how it's supposed to sound.
Oh, right, yeah, you need something a bit more, okay. Let's, let me just load up, like, okay, BBC Symphony Orchestra, this should be a bit more high fidelity.
Alright.
Okay, we'll go with this.
Nice.
Something like that.
Stereo and everything.
Alright. So, yeah, no, this is like deliberately lo-fi. There's another thing that Waves Factory have made, and that's a plugin which is cassette tape plugin. So you can put that on anything, and that can really mess with stuff as well. So I made that little loop of the drum beat, which is super lo-fi, and then you can like put like there's like Tascam. You get all the like left right weirdness.
Nice.
And then like you can. There's all different tapes, so different sort of types of tape saturation you can use. And then obviously the micro will like band pass it, and then the home is like slightly different EQ, and then the pro is just like a flat EQ.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can like that is, it's like adds in loads of like imperfections into stuff. You've got all of this like the wow depth, flutter, dropouts, degradation, random snaps. So you can like put like, and it like when the tape like gets stuck, they're just like,
Yeah.
all of that stuff, and then like crosstalk and stuff. Yeah, it's pretty weird.
Nice. Usually these plugins aren't as flexible, right? Usually it's just like, hey, there's 3 modes and they all sound pretty much the same.
The same, yeah. This
One of
is
them
what
is
it
the
does.
most extreme one you'll be using.
Yeah, exactly. No, this is got all sorts of stuff going on. Ugh. So
This actually kind of sounds like the real deal, right? Because I remember like 10, 15 years ago, these tape saturation plugins all came out, like the PSP one and stuff, and I never found a use for them because they all kind of sounded like they didn't really do much in my experience. And now all these plugins are just like lo-fi machines, and I put them on everything.
yeah. Totally. I mean, we were talking about waves earlier, and I saw that they had like this an offer on for people who use what was it, sound better or something, people who are subscribed to Sound Better, which I am. Okay. Sort of like a LinkedIn for people who use Spotify or whatever, or for like artists on Spotify. And it connects producers with artists and mix engineers and so everyone can sort of like, if you need a vocalist or whatever. And they sent out an email. Sound Better. Yeah.
Oh, so that's I can see that the Audio Movers thing is by Sound Better as well, or in association with.
It's in association with, yeah.
Same thing then.
I'm not sure if it is the same company, but there was an offer on, like, I think you get 50% off as a Sound Better member.
Right.
But they sent through this email with all of these offers on, and one of the offers was like a free Waves plugin.
Mm-hmm. So
I was like, sure, might as well try that out. And now it basically means, now that I've downloaded that was on their new version of Waves. I think they're on like version 10, which means all their old plugins, which I had bought, are version 9 and don't work. And if I want those updates, I have to subscribe to their whatever at however much a month. Just ridiculous. And they're like, they didn't say anything about like the Black Lives Matter move. All the other plugin companies did, and they were just silent.
Oh yeah? Oh shit. Okay.
But I think it's because they're based in Tel Aviv and they can't really talk about apartheid or whatever if you're in the middle of like, that kind of thing. So
yeah, that makes sense. I mean, yeah, you can be there and still support certain causes, but maybe they use labor from like the settlements or something.
Yeah, the West Bank. Yeah. We've got coders in Gaza. So I'm just going through some of these chat room thing. Imagine buying plugins. Okay, mate. You carry on with your cracks. See how long your computer lasts.
I think it's pretty safe these days, but yeah, no, I am.
Not that you'd know, right?
No, at this point, I think I'm fully legit right now.
Good stuff. To be fair, though, there's like, if they're good plugins, sure, like, try it out. But, like, if they're good plugins and you want that company to do well, there's only, like, a lot of the time you can get a sale where it's like, you can buy a plugin for, like, 20 quid or whatever. And if you're going to get loads of use out of it, then I feel like it's worthwhile. But what really gets me is when you buy it and then there's an Apple update or some sort of update, and then it's like, oh, and I've just wasted all that money. So
I know, man. Like when I did the customer service type thing, people would call me up around the time Catalina came out. Like, well, I updated my computer and everything, and now nothing works anymore. And then I would have to explain to those people like, well, Pro Tools might be the industry standard, but it doesn't actually work as soon as you have to do an Apple update. Please, downgrade and next time just wait for a year and a half before updating.
I wish I had that. I wish I had thought of that.
But I mean, have you been, yeah, you've been on Logic and on Macs for forever, right?
Forever. Yeah. And there's always problems. But the thing is, I feel like there's always problems. So then you think, oh, this new update, that will solve the problems. And
Yes.
it might solve the problem, but then it creates other problems. So then you're like, oh, God.
Yeah,
Keeps
it's
you
crazy how
chasing
like
it.
it in my mind kind of I'm still like sometimes I'm like, should I get a MacBook for this music thing? And then I realize like I have zero problems on PC. Like every problem I run into right now is something that is on the developer side where it's like I sent Ableton an email because it kept freezing. And
Right.
they're like, yeah, we're aware of this bug where if you're in the sounds tab and you press search, then it freezes for a while, and we're working on it. Nothing to worry about. Next time, just pick a different tab and search from there. Okay, fine. And that's the only audio like music production problem I've had, and buying
Right.
a Mac right now would be a massive pain in the ass, basically,
Yep.
compared to how smooth everything is now.
No, fair enough.
But I guess they don't make Logic for PCs.
No, it used to be eMagic, the original Logic I had on PC. But then it got bought by Apple.
Yeah, what, like 15 years ago now or something? Like a
Yeah.
long time.
Yeah, way to make me feel old, man. But yeah, no, it was a while ago. But yeah, I don't know, man. I like when I started using Logic, I think, well, when I started using it properly, by that point I'd sort of transitioned to Mac anyway.
Right.
But then when I went to college to study production, they were like, "Oh, you've got to use Pro Tools and you've got to have all this other stuff," and and I remember like being in a session, and we had finished all the recording and whatever, and I just wanted to bounce out WAV stems so that I could mix it at home.
Yeah.
And there was nowhere in the Pro Tools, there was no like bounce or export as WAV or anything like that. You could export it as like three. If you said export this project into audio, it would spit out like three different formats, none of which are readable by anything other than Pro Tools. So you're like, I think they've obviously changed it since, but like, yeah, it just meant that most of my college days were like wasted because I was learning about a program I was never going to use. You know?
Yeah, that seems to be a big thing with unless you're like a studio engineer in a studio where there's like one setup and multiple engineers, then I feel
Yeah.
like you have to know how Pro Tools works.
Yeah.
But I don't know, man.
I mean, most UK studios now use Logic as well, or they'll have an option for Logic. They might use Pro Tools as their main thing, but they'll definitely have. It's maybe not the case in America, because I think America's still very much like Pro Tools, Pro Tools.
Right.
But yeah, like in the UK, because so many people have got Logic, or something else, or Cubase or whatever, then a lot of studios that we've been into to record or whatever, I always say, can we set up a Logic session? They're like, yeah, no problem. We'll just switch it.
All right.
So,
I mean, these days you can. That's what I would do at this point because I'm mostly in Ableton Live. I've been messing around with Renoise as well, but that's obviously not like a DAW that you can import stems into and do all that kind of stuff.
yeah. Or Bitwig. Have you tried Bitwig?
I haven't tried Bitwig yet, but I've been for the audiobook work, I've been getting into Reaper a bit because it's so customizable, and you can just install that on a thumb drive or on Dropbox basically, and you can just have it with you portable.
Right.
So you could potentially, if they don't have like a very strict protocol on their computer, you could bring the portable version and
And
just
just install it.
yeah.
Right.
You don't even have to install it. It would just run from the USB drive.
Oh, well, that's good. And does it have like options for multiple inputs? So you
Yeah,
could
yeah.
have like,
It's a full on like fully featured DAW, and it's the most customizable one I've used thus far. I feel like.
right, right, cool.
Yes, it's really yeah.
I should check that out. I mean, I'm kind of at a point now where it's like, I know, there's that thing. What were they saying? There was some guy who like tweeted, uh, you should come out of lockdown having learnt a new skill or something.
Right.
And like, just sort of making everyone feel a bit crap if they haven't like come out of lockdown being like, I've learnt a new language, or like, I mean, my wife's learning how to code at the moment.
All right.
um,
That's supposed to be like this is your final chance to learn how to code. To
that's it, yeah. So I mean, good on her for doing that.
yeah.
I'm sort of at the point where it's like, I know how to do some things, and that has got me through. So I don't know. Yeah, maybe I'm just scared to learn anything new. I don't know.
I think, to be honest, I think a very important skill to be focusing on right now, with all this free time due to Corona, is how to cope with the literal apocalypse right now. Like,
Well, like Super Zero just said, like mental health, and focusing on being able to just come out of it not being a gibbering mess. It's probably the
yeah, I mean, this shit just takes a major toll. Like the fact that I don't have to change all that much is great.
yeah.
Uh, but like the way I feel when I go outside right now to go to the supermarket, like when I walk past the security, like there was a security
Man,
guy
yeah.
at the supermarket today who was like, half a meter away from me when I walked into the shop, and I was just like, I'm trying to do my best, but this is making it so stressful.
Totally.
Yeah.
And also, so we had to take the cats to the vet the other day, and we had to go on a bus, and there's like bus announcements saying, please don't stand up. So you're not allowed to stand on the bus. I mean, how do you even get on and off without standing? I don't know. But then it's also saying keep 2 meters apart. But the seats are like half a meter apart, if that. So, so, so I don't see anyone stopping people getting on. How is a full bus going to be able to get social distance? Like,
I know. I mean, the way
just none of it
running
makes
in the
sense.
UK, from what I can tell, is insane. Like, you have to wear a mask in public transport right now here in the Netherlands,
Yeah,
and every time I see the bus, there's like 5 people
yeah.
on the entire thing because you have
Just
to. I think
wouldn't.
you have to reserve a spot using an app or something.
But also, a lot of people cycle in the Netherlands, so I guess you can get away with it, maybe, like being a bit more sort of autonomous, um, without
Yeah,
fear
yeah,
of being run over. Um,
yeah.
I think in London, we don't really have cycle lanes. We have like roads that are really narrow, and massive buses and trucks go down. And if you want to be a crazy cyclist, like, go for your life, but you are gambling.
I know. Yeah, I know a few people who lived in London for a while who are from here, and they're like, they spent their first few months trying to cycle around the city, and then we're like, you know what, this isn't worth it.
It's not worth it, man. Not at all.
Yeah.
The roads just aren't big enough. Yeah, but I guess because and it's, I guess having like sort of nice flat land in Netherlands is quite, it lends itself to cycling more than having hilly sort of stuff everywhere, I guess, as well.
Yeah, but London is pretty flat, London itself, right?
Well, it's kind of like a basin. So,
Oh, is it? Okay.
yeah, because everything comes down to the Thames. So, where I am is quite high up on a hill, and then, like, there's various hills once you get sort of past zone 2 and 3.
Yeah,
It gets a bit hilly. But yeah, it's just like super busy and cramped and noisy, and
of course. Yeah.
yeah, you just can't go anywhere on. I used to cycle a lot, but you would just cycle on the pavement as a kid, and you get away with it. But
Yeah.
now, as an adult, you're not allowed to cycle on the pavement, so you're just like
No, you'll get tased, man.
basically dodging hunks of metal.
Yep.
Not the one. Desi's put a version of me with a rainbow mask on. That's nice.
Awesome. All right, let me zoom in on that.
That's good. Fair bit of DIY to do, Super Zero. So he's keeping busy. I've got myself a garden now, so we've been doing a bit of gardening, but the weather's been a bit rubbish recently, so we haven't.
Recently moved.
Well, so last year I got married and moved into a house together with my wife within like weeks. So that was pretty intense. Oh yeah, and we got burgled in our old place just after we sold it. And I think they had probably scoped it out on the, like, there's like Rightmove apps where you can like see all of the inside of the flat and whatever.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we had to sort of like move out into hotel rooms and staying on friends' couches and stuff while planning the wedding, and also like trying to move house. So it was super super stressful. But now we're in Lewisham in South London, which is kind of near where I grew up. So I'm pretty happy, and we've got a house. We've got 2 cats, and it's all very chilled. And I've got a studio, but my studio is near to where we used to live, so I have to like commute across London to get there, and that's why I've had to move back to the house, like with a few bits. That's why there's no acoustic treatment anywhere, and I'm just working on headphones.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
I managed to get like a MIDI keyboard and my sound card and a couple of speakers, and I've got this Behringer Neutron. Have you seen this?
Yes. Yeah. Wait.
This guy. Can you? Oh, you can't see it. Can you see it on the Twitch broadcast?
The neutron. Yeah, yeah. I know all about the neutron. My friend has it, and
it's quite fun, but
the least, the least cool looking synth I've ever used.
Well, that's it. I mean, well, I've put a new panel on it.
Yeah, my friend did that too. The black one, right?
No, I put the multicolored one on there, which is even less cool. It's like
to the right tab in my browser. Can you show it?
There you go. You should see
It's
it.
pretty cool. That is.
It's like, the Moog grandmother.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's kind of like that in that it basically takes all of the sections, and sort of color codes them so that when you come to sort of patching it modular wise, you can each of the modular ins and outs are color coded according to which section.
Much easier.
Makes so much sense. Yeah. So it's basically it's maybe not cool, but it definitely makes a lot of sense for me, because I don't really know what I'm doing with modular synthesis, so I'm kind of just like, oh, that relates to this, right? Let's try it.
Hey, listen, if you know what you're doing with modular synths, you've gone too far down. Sorry, man. Like
Totally.
You either have fun or you know what you're doing, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I saw so a friend of mine, Anik Thapar. He's a producer, mastering engineer. He's just moved to South London. So I was hanging out with him a fair bit, and he had a gig with Ryan Rival Consoles. Do you know Rival Consoles?
Not personally, but
But you've heard his music, and they were doing a live modular set with a pianist, and I mean it started late, of course, because there were technical issues as there always are, like we had just now, but yeah, like it was super interesting because like they would just sort of it was really like drone soundscapey kind of stuff. Um, and then occasionally one of them would do something, and then it would all go wrong, and then everyone would be sort of like looking at each other like, oh, and then like, oh, let's start again, do something else. But it was really cool, and like it sort of adds a bit more excitement when you kind of think, well, any moment you might press the wrong thing or plug something into the wrong thing, and it will create like a horrendous noise. So it's sort of like
yeah.
dicing with death sort of thing.
Yeah, sure. Like I feel like it's kind of it reminds me of when I got my first like IBM PC. My neighbor when I was a kid used to be an engineer at IBM, and he said like in the early 90s he gave me like an old 1983 IBM PC, and I was like, going in there and typing in commands and going through the folder structure and sort of, and the every time I'd fuck some stuff up and make it crash or whatever, um, that would suck, I guess. But the excitement I would get from just wading through folder after folder of stuff I didn't understand but looked cool or whatever, and that I learned stuff from outweighed the risk of fucking everything up. So I feel like
But also the risk kind of makes it more exciting, don't you think? You're like,
yes, exactly, yeah,
oh, let's see how far I can push it.
like a modular gig. It's like when someone patches in something and suddenly you get a screech instead of a cool sound.
Mm.
Like that is part of why you appreciate the cool sounds that come out of it when it does go well.
Yeah, 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 totally.
But when someone comes up and plugs in their drum machine and it goes wrong, like maybe learn how your drum machine.
Totally. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh man, yeah. There was quite a bit of. We used to have quite a bit of like technology issues with Submo because there was so much stuff that I would do to the sort of recorded projects. Um, you know, with the Submotion Orchestra stuff, it was like record, as a 6-piece band, and then go in hard on the production, and then try and almost like reverse engineer that into a live show again.
Yeah.
And so there were so many extra bells and whistles that we had to work out. And our trumpet player, bless him, he ended up having to learn how to basically first he had to program. No, first of all we started off with like an Ableton project, so he had a laptop and a MIDI controller. But then we were like, this looks crap because you just see like the laptop, and I hate that. When you go to a live gig and there's just someone staring into a laptop. So we transitioned to an MPC.
A good friend of mine is a trumpet player who has done a lot of live shows with a laptop. So yeah.
So
I'll talk to him about this later.
well, I mean, I'm sure he has I think a lot of live musicians, they hate the idea of like having to have a laptop on stage.
Yes. Yeah. No, absolutely.
So that's the kind of the point. But like, then when you have the MPC, it's a lot flatter. There's no, the audience don't see a shining Apple logo, they just see some wires, so that's
Yeah.
fine. And then it turned out the MPC didn't travel well because every time we would turn up to a gig, it would be like, oh, this has fallen off, or like, because airport baggage attendant people just chucking stuff everywhere. Actually, our bassist, uh, they managed to run over his bass case with one of the little buggy they drive around with all the trolley with all the baggage on the back. They had
Yes.
they had run over the bass case, and the whole thing had like buckled in the middle, and there was a big tire mark across the middle of it. And when it came off, it came round the sort of conveyor belt, and he was like, "What? What's happened here?" Took it to the airport people, and they're like, "Oh, it must have been like that before it went on the on the plane."
Nice try.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah. But anyways, yeah. So then we sort of moved to the Pioneer Torres, the SP16, and I got one, and the trumpeter got one. So then I could sort of add stuff to projects in the studio, and then he could, we could just transfer the stuff straight over to him to then do live or whatever. And it meant that I could learn it. So then we were both learning how to use that thing. But that definitely, I think I pretty much made a couple of like dub techno tune. The couple of the Leo James releases were basically made on the Torres SP16.
Okay. So would you say that it's like a fully featured workstation as far as sketching and
For
like,
sketching out ideas, definitely, like, and to be able to have it does integrate into a DAW, but to have that option where you can just take it live, not have any computer involved, and just and you can have whole sequences running. The other addition to it, the other good feature is that it syncs with any Pioneer Nexus setups. So you can be playing a DJ set and then transition seamlessly back and forth from the SP16, and you can have like, so you could create a sort of like acid techno set with just a bunch of like 909 sounds on your SP16, and and then mix into full records and back and forth, kind of thing. But then but anything else as well. It's definitely it's opened up a lot of opportunities, or a lot of potential for opportunities for live shows. And I think if I was to go back into doing live stuff, I'd want to incorporate it somehow.
nice. Yeah, I
But
mean
yeah,
that sounds really flexible where you can without workarounds integrate it into a DJ set or the other way around, I guess.
yeah, and then come back and plug it straight into your computer. You can transfer files over MIDI, over USB. You can also use it as a MIDI controller for your DAW,
Right.
so it can like trigger chords and stuff off there.
Okay.
You know how like with Machine, I think you can set like a certain key. You can say, okay, my project's in the key of C minor, and
Yeah.
it won't let you play any wrong notes. That kind of thing. You can go, okay, I want the Lydian scale or the Dorian scale, and you can put all of that into it as well. So yeah, it's super flexible. The only problem I have with it is that it only has one type of reverb. So
One type.
only one type of reverb. So and you can only use that reverb on the master mixer of it.
Right.
So you can't dial
That,
reverb into a. Well, you could because you can resample. So you could trigger one pad, dial in reverb into that while sampling that into another pad, and then that would be the reverb sound. But it's
right.
all a bit. It's a bit of a workaround.
The yeah, it's the effect that you don't want to resample, right?
Well, yeah, no, ideally, yeah.
Yeah.
So And also, you can only have one send on the master channel strip. So you have 16 channels because each pad is a channel, and then you can dial in reverb, or other effects, but you can't have more than one effect at a time. So obviously, you're just going to
Right.
have reverb as an option. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, there's like a few little, oh, I wish it did that or whatever, but yeah.
Hey, I mean, if those are the only complaints, that sounds pretty good.
Yeah, yeah, it's
I
definitely worth looking into.
pre-ordered the tracker by Polyend, I think the company is called.
What's that?
And that's just like
Oh, the MIDI thing.
it's basically it's just Renoise as a standalone hardware unit. It's great. It's
Right.
great anyway.
Because the Polyend also make that thing which is like a MIDI triggered beta.
Actually, yes, maybe.
That was fascinating. They set up like maybe 6 of them around a drum kit, and you can MIDI program a drum kit to play a live drum kit with the MIDI triggered betas.
That is yeah, that is this one I think.
I'll have a look.
Yeah, I think it's called Perk, right?
Yeah,
Any percussion instrument you strike with a stick or your bare hands works flawlessly with Perk.
yeah. The only trouble is each one of them is 370 quid.
Uh,
So to do a full drum kit, you're talking a few grand.
Jesus.
It's a bit annoying.
That's yeah, 450 euros. Holy shit. But yeah, the tracker is like for what it does, it I felt like it was worth the money. I
Okay.
was also kind of excited that I like for the first time in my life as an artist sort of I had enough money to buy something like that. So
Awesome. But that is that. So how different is that to, say like a machine, like a Native Instruments machine?
well, this is just fully standalone. So
Right.
there's no external DAW, and it's a tracker, and I just love the tracker interface for stuff like this. And I've been using Renoise and using it mostly because I have this old Lenovo ThinkPad, which has a pretty shitty trackpad, but the keyboard is really nice. So I use Renoise as sort of a hardware stand-in kind of thing, where I just open up my laptop and get to press keys and buttons and make music that way.
Cool.
And this is basically that, but it's a flat, like just standalone thing without.
And it's got a little scroll wheel or something. That's looks
Yeah.
pretty handy.
Yeah. Otherwise, it would be basically like it feels like it would be like dialing in a like an 80s FM synth, where it's like
Yeah, yeah.
scrolling through menu after menu, and this looks like it makes it a lot easier as well. Like you can
Is it touchscreen or?
no, you can use I think that I don't know. I watched the whole tutorial, like an hour-long tutorial on it, and it looked very flexible. Where you have the grid is like that grid of buttons to the
Yeah.
lower left. You can use that for a lot of different stuff, and then all those buttons to the top right are all clearly labeled and just make a lot of sense. And there's
Yeah.
directional keys. And
There's not too many like menus within menus.
right, exactly, and everything is just like tracker. Like it's basically a machine that is made to fit with the tracker way of working, which means that it just has all the buttons to get the right commands in the right places
Perfect.
where you want them. Yeah.
Yeah. I've not really used that much that sort of way of working. I've not really like sequences and things like that. I mean the the SP16 does have like a 16 button step sequencer.
Right.
And you can have up to 4 sets of 16. So you can have like 4 patterns, one after the other.
Right.
And then you can program in like a sort of sequence, or like a sequence of sequences, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So that kind of expands how easy it is to create something. But this looks like it's got 4 banks of 16 just on the one, on the like, there's 4 banks of 16 buttons straight away.
Yeah.
And then you can probably like go even further in, and create full song sequences with
Yeah.
that.
It's from the stuff I saw, it seemed like you can or at least I can use it for exactly the same functionality as I've been using Renoise for.
Right.
Which is basically just making enough patterns to make an interesting sequence of sequences.
Have you
And
released anything that you've made on that?
I think my last two Jungle EPs
Right.
were made all in Renoise and then mixed down in Ableton. And I always add some, some flourishes and some effects and do some audio editing. But
Cool.
um,
I guess like,
a lot of like the jungle stuff, like it's chopping up breaks and stuff is really fun in a tracker.
of course.
And then all the effects and VSTs and native Ableton effects, they obviously do a lot of the legwork as far as the actual sound goes. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's flexible enough to have fun while making some like mostly pretty old school sounding music.
There's nothing like chopping up an amen break in a sequencer and just smashing away at the various bits of it. I did a similar thing where I've been making some jungle with a guy. Do you know Pete Cannon?
Yeah, yeah.
So he came round and I was messing around with the SP16 and we loaded in a bunch of breaks, and just reversing some of the buttons, time stretching, pitching, and just randomly sort of allocating processing to various buttons, and then just sort of smashing around randomly and coming up with some quite fun jungle beats and stuff.
Nice.
But yeah, that's sort of, and then you get into the boring part of like having to decide, right, this bit is going here, and then in the and then you get into the mixing and da da da. But to be sort of raw creative with it was a lot of fun, definitely.
Yeah, and I feel like especially making jungle, because I don't really layer anything except like a break on a break, but I don't layer kicks and snares underneath the breaks. I all do it with multi-band gating and
Right.
other
Yeah.
dynamics processing and stuff, and it just makes it a sort of fun rabbit hole nerd adventure to make that sound as good as it can. And
Fair play. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I'm still like, my go-to is constantly layering, and so that makes, doing like choppage really tricky.
well, that's why I got into it now. Like I started out with chopping breaks when I started producing. It was like, just jungle and drum and bass is all I listened to for a while and for a few years, and I started making it. And now that I have the full confidence that I don't have to, that I can make it sound good or at least like acceptable without layering and without doing all kinds of like multi track stuff. Now I can just do whatever I want and just make the music and then
That's
load it
great.
into Ableton and make it sound good.
Awesome. I mean, a lot of it boils down to having a good source in the first place, and some of those breaks are just, there's nothing like them really. Like, you can't.
Yeah.
There's no like over compressed sample pack that you can download that's gonna match it in terms of character.
Right. Right. Yeah.
So yeah, no, that's cool. I do find like, I quite like layering, live kits over stuff. So like say like you one of my favorite live kit at the moment is the 70s drummer that comes with Contact.
Uh-huh.
Where is it?
Yeah, the Abbey Road one. Yeah, you just strolled past it.
No, that's something else. Where?
Is
Oh
it?
yeah. No, sorry, it is. Yeah. I just went past it. You're right. The tight kit. Um, so that used to
I
take.
have this now.
Have you got that?
I wait, let me.
It's just so malleable. Like,
Oh, sorry about that. I
don't,
think I just went over your screen with my
no,
mouse.
that's fine. I'm trying to. Oh, there we go. Make that bigger. Can I close that window? That part of the window? No. So yeah, like also so Tommy, the drummer for Submotion, we were working on some ideas a couple of years ago, and we figured out because he had a little what's it like Roland MIDI drum kit, and you can map all of this stuff to the MIDI drum kit, and so you can play essentially like a live kit. And this is for me, this was the most like authentic sounding kit. The 70s drummer. This is like various like BFD. I think it's up to BFD 3 now. Big effing drums or something is the name of it. That's another Contact instrument, or maybe it's a standalone thing. And you can also get addictive drums, I think, is another one that a lot of people use.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, for me, like this with a couple of plugins is because you got your mixer. You can like, you know, I mean, it comes with a bunch of stuff dialed in, which is a bit annoying. So you have to kind of know what you're doing. But you know, just to start off with like a simple simple kit, if you just sort of take all of the sends off. And that's the other thing, is that it's also got its own reverbs. You can have like a spring reverb, ambiences, all those different things built into the thing itself, and a 140 plate, which is pretty useful. But then the overheads and a room mic, and you can set, I think you can, if you did like a multi-channel Contact instrument, you can output each of these channels to their own buses, and then you can affect them that way. But I mean, just in terms of like, if I just I'll put that simple drum beat in. So that's like really straightforward. But then each channel's got its own EQ, transient, compressor, and tape on each one. And then like I find like the fact that there's the stereo overheads and the stereo room mic, if you layer that over any sort of programmed beats, immediately it's just like wider and fuller, and like sounds a lot more like live, and you're not having to do loads of like stereo image processing on it or whatever. And you can also like make each thing really tight. You can dial in, so say I don't want any kick drum in my overheads or the room mics, you can pull that out as well. And you can sort of make it a lot tighter, rather than having like a big boomy kick or whatever.
That's all sort of per module, per drum.
Per thing. And then you can switch out snares as well. There's like 2 different types of snare. And you can also customize stuff. So for instance, like if I select by MIDI, if I select like a blank so that's got no articulation on it. But say I want to like, okay, at the very end of this phrase, I want like a choked cymbal. So I want like a big crash, but I want to choke it straight away. They've all got all the various articulations, all the sort of bells, tips, edge, and then choke as well. And then you can create your own custom sort of MIDI layout with that.
Nice.
Which is, I mean, I've never needed to use anything else. There's nothing that I feel that another kit would give me that I can't use in here. Do you know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah, I just checked. I have Abbey Road 60s drummer, and I have something else, Studio Drummer, I think.
Studio Drummer is slightly different. Where is it? Studio Drummer is this one. So like, yeah, the session kit is new. Yeah, so like, I've not really seen a lot of drum kits laid out like this.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Whereas the 70s kit is like the classic way of laying out a kit. But obviously there's more tom options and various other things. But I assume that it works in a similar sort of way.
Right.
Except it's not doing anything. Oh, it's because it's MIDI channel 2. Let's go. Right. So I imagine it will take a bit of tweaking to sort of, maybe the kick is maybe a bit deader or a bit more like thumpy.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, each of the snares is going to be different. Each of the snare sounds and whatever cymbal sounds is going to be different in each one. Yeah. I've never had to use the 50s kit. I feel like that's going to be like, you know, it's almost a skiffle kit. You know, I was thinking like, you know, a washboard and like a jug or something.
Yeah, just like one of those old circular broadcast mics.
Yeah.
In a suit. It's just
just one over the top. Yeah. That's it. There's no options to change anything, and
right.
No, but it seems like it's, but it's pretty ropey. But yeah, like all of that stuff is changeable. They seem to have several room mics, which is good.
Oh, right.
So they've got like a mono room mic, a stereo room mic, a mono overhead, and a stereo overhead. So you can decide how authentically crap you want it to sound.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I love authentically crappy sounding things, but a 50s drum kit just doesn't.
It's not one of those things you really go to. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Name one iconic drum sound from the 50s.
Well, there's a vintage drummer here. I mean, that looks like the kick drum's made out of a massive piece of cork. What? How is that?
How's that going to sound?
I don't know. I mean, that's just awful. That's like a concert bass drum, you know, like an orchestral sort of, what's it? Like timpani laid on its side.
Is that just an 808 kick drum and the fire doors from Volks?
Yeah, pretty much. But then but each one has all these sort of other percussion options on them as well, which are quite useful. A cool percussion, because I'm always like looking for new percussion sounds and things. You know, when you get to that point in a track and you're like, it kind of needs a shaker, but I keep using the same shaker and I need something else.
Yeah, keep using the same shaker I got from a sample pack from 2003.
Exactly. So this thing is pretty cool. I think it's a Waves factory thing again. It's called Shireen. Sounds like someone who works in a hairdressing salon, but Shireen. Um, but it's basically like any shaker you could want laid out on a table with a sequencer and a mixer, and each.
Why
If
is it called Shireen?
I've no idea, maybe it means something, but each
Oh, wait. Is it a shaker shrine? Is that what it is?
uh,
Is it like the
the shaker shrine. Oh, like a combination of, yeah, maybe.
because Native Instruments is. Oh, wait, this is not by Native Instruments, is it?
No, this is Waves Factory.
Let me see where they're from. If they're from Germany, then I'm right. Because I'm sorry, Germans, but you are the worst at puns.
It's very funny.
I'm looking at you every dubstep night I've ever played in Germany.
Oh, shame.
Da-da-da. About.
Oh, I
Okay,
think
so
I
Mallorca.
right. Oh, Mallorca.
Yeah.
Interesting. So anyway, this Shireen, um, it's got like four different tambourines and eight different shakers, and you can play all of them at the same time, and it will sync to your project, not just from the first beat, but it will give you, like, you know how, like, if you were playing a shaker in time, you would have that initial it wouldn't just go do you know what I mean? It wouldn't just start on halfway through the thing. It would have that initial thing. And that's what this does, is it sort of like anticipates the beat, so that
Right.
you have that, like, so that the peak of the shaker is on the beat, rather than, or the peak of the waveform is on the beat.
Yeah.
So that's all of them together. But you can also, like, and you can, like, dial in the various mics. So that's the close mics of all of them. But you can also individually change. So you can turn them all off. So you can just have, like, say, like one shaker, and then you can then individually uh, change that, the pan of those,
Uh-huh.
and I think you can change the. There was some button. I think you could change, like, each individual shaker's mixer as well, but I can't remember how you do it.
Okay.
But yeah, you can sort of, like, dial in as many or as little as you want, and you can change the sequencer so that, you know, have whatever, so off beats or whatever, and you can turn them all, like, or turn the velocities off and whatever, and bring them up and down.
Me from 10 years ago would have just wanted this plugin for everything.
Yeah.
Also, I want it now.
It's useful, you know, like when you're sort of, you want more of a, like, realistic shaker vibe, and obviously you can, like, dial in some of the ambience and stuff so that it's maybe like, oh, why is that really, oh, super quiet now. Oh, because nothing's. I've got nothing on. Okay, so that's that on its own. And then
Output something. Was that just like a hand going past the?
maybe, yeah, maybe it's just a sort of stock, sort of background guy who wasn't invited turning up with his little beanbag or something. But yeah, each one's got a very different character. And I think you can do individual hits as well. And just sort of, like the old like Yoko Ono special. It's like, I don't know what I'm doing, but yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's Shireen, which is quite useful. Have you got any hot tips for plugins that you like?
Ooh, let me just open up Ableton, because I do. Well, I mean, my hottest tip right now is the Native Instruments Transient Master, which is just like,
oh man, yeah.
there is. I don't know how I went all these years without it, because now I just put in. I've been making like early 2000s tech step ripoffs.
Nice.
Yeah, and it's like, it's really cool because I can. There was this whole period of time where you could just make that music, but it would sound like a slightly more plasticky, modern version of it. But now you can make it actually sound good with, modern transient shapers and that kind of thing, but still have all the character of
the classic.
beats.
Yeah. One of the things that really amazed me when I did the session with Pete is he turned up with a with a load of samples from I think it would have been like back in the day with like Computer Music Magazine and stuff, they would give you like a floppy disk of samples for your Amiga or whatever, and he's basically sort of digitized a bunch of them, or at least turned them into put them on his hard drive, and loading them up. You're just sort of scrolling through all these songs. You're like, oh well, that's that tune. That's this other one, and they're literally just like one sample from Computer Music and a breakbeat, and you're just like, oh my god, that's that song.
I know, man. I know. I'm friends with two guys who used to be pretty big in the drum and bass, sort of like the neurofunk, I guess you'd call it, scene.
Yeah.
And they made this sample pack for, I think, Loop Masters, and like a month after they released the sample pack, tunes started to come out from like, Ed Rush and stuff, like Optical.
Yeah.
Who just lifted the entire bass line from the sample pack and just like used that.
Yeah.
It's like, it's just the same drums everyone else is using and a sample from that sample pack that two artists made, and that is a tune, which is obviously how it's always been done, but
that's it. Well, I mean, also, like, I guess when you're making stuff in an Amiga sequencer or some sort of like, whatever they used to use, like I can't remember the name of it, but Pete uses it a lot now.
Like Octamed.
Octamed, yeah, exactly. And it's like, if you can just go, right, there's the sample, play that on loop without having to change pitches or do anything else, and it's like, well, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, that's how I approach stuff in Renoise now in the tracker, is like, if I throw in a sample and choose a starting point or whatever, and it sounds good and I don't have to do anything to it, then I just use it that way because that's easiest, and I don't have to, like, I know how to do all this stuff. I just don't want to interrupt the creative process at that point. I can always make it my own sound later or whatever, and then I just sort of forget about it and it works, and it's great.
Yeah. Totally, and interrupting the creative process is a big thing, because
Yeah.
when you start getting into mixing and stuff, and then you're like, you can't help yourself when you've put down like a beat, or you've put in a sample, and it's straight away into the EQ. Oh, I need to like, notch this frequency, or I need to like. And it's like, you don't even have a tune yet, mate. Like, come on. Like, and you're constantly having to like battle with yourself to be like, no, not now. Like, don't need to start rooting yet. You don't need to start EQing. Just get the idea in, and if it works, it works. Then you can come back to it later. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's something that's come with like, well, as I said before, like the confidence that I can make audio do anything I want, like in post, basically. Like I feel like I'm at a level where I can either fix it or I can delete it and do something better, or at least something that will fit in place of the thing that sucks. So I'm fairly confident that I don't need to tweak a thing until it works, if it like during the creative process, the sketching process. So and I not very long ago, about a year and a half ago, I discovered that I have like a raging case of ADHD, like adult, like what they used to call ADD, because I'm not all that hyperactive. But I've adopted a pretty radical approach to not interrupting my focus, as far as like I don't even have that much concentration. But when I'm actually when I expect to be in a situation where there's a creative process and sort of a flow that's going to be involved, then I know that, okay, I'm going to step into this with the mindset that I'm just not going to tweak anything. I'm just going to do this thing. And the moment I start doing something else, that I task switch, it's basically over.
Yeah.
I won't have any control over being able to focus on that project again. So I have to, whether it's like...
That's kind of like the modular stuff as well. It's like, once it's done, it's done. And you can't like press Control Alt Delete or whatever, or Control Z. It's like, once you've moved that cable, it's gone. Like...
Exactly, yeah. And you sort of, you have to let that go, and let the idea go that what you're doing at that point has to be the best that it could possibly be. Because that's like, that used to be me for about 10, 15 years of producing, was what if this turns out to suck later? I might as well spend 2 hours right now on this bass line and make sure it sounds good. And now I'm just like, it sounds good now, it's probably going to suck later, but I'll fix it later because I have pads to make or whatever.
Yeah. And also like knowing that you can fix it when you, if you decide that it does need fixing. Yeah. But for now it serves a purpose, and that's fine. Yeah, having that confidence to do that is definitely like something that you learn over time, for sure. Someone's asked, I'm just gonna jump in on this. Someone called Reisenkampf Walrus. I'm guessing, is this another German pun?
Kampf Walrus? I mean,
is he a walrus? Work walrus?
He is a wait. Eisenkampf.
Some sort of camp.
Some sort of a struggle.
Struggling walrus.
A Riesenkampf. Oh, right. It translates here as Battle of the Giants.
Oh.
It's like a
battle walrus. Giant fighting walrus. That's what he's called. Excellent.
Oh, yeah, like a Titan walrus.
That's pretty like rock and roll. So he says, most, in my opinion, must-have plugins are OTT. Don't get me started on that. Camel Crusher doesn't exist anymore. Camel Crusher doesn't exist. It's been bought by Camel Fat has been bought by Apple. I don't know whether Camel Crusher is, but yeah, camel fat became this thing in Logic. Oh god, right, Logic, multi effects, fat effects. This is the new version of camel fat. Basically, it's exactly the same thing. They bought it, and that is now all of the same stuff that you could do in camel fat. You can do in here. I watched an old Noisia video years ago, and they were using camel fat on like with everything off except for I think like 5% tube distortion, and then that created a limiter. And I used that all the time on my drums and stuff, and it really helped. But then of course then everything went out the window there. So yeah. And then he says, I think you should start doing that. Oh, and Serum. I mean, Serum's, yeah, amazing wavetable synthesis, but I don't actually have it, but I think I demoed it and then decided that I didn't want to sound like every other EDM act. It's kind of the thing.
It does seem to be geared towards...
It's got like a really plasticky sound to it. I don't know why, but it sounds like everything's so clean and like shiny.
Yeah, I watched this demo by the guy who made it, and like if you put a spectrum analyzer at like the highest quality and you put in a sine wave, it's like an actual pure sine wave, whereas other like massive, like the old massive would have
it's got a grains in it.
Yeah. And it is really clean, which has a lot of potential for, very intricate sound design and stuff. But I'll take a shitty 8-bit sample over Serum any day if it sounds...
That's the thing. I mean, for me, like, one of the best purchases I made was buying the Arturia V collection, which has something called true analog emulation, which they've designed, which basically, like, I mean, the thing came because I bought it as a USB thing, not because the download was massive.
Mm-hmm.
So they delivered this thing, and it came with all these manuals, and I started reading them, and it was just like the level of detail they've gone to emulate stuff like a CS80, like, is mind blowing. Just to give it a sort of real analog sound, which is deliberately not clean, is deliberately all kinds of artifacts all over the place, and that's what gives it its like warmth in quotes or whatever, that kind of like analog feel to it. So the difference between that and Serum is like night and day to me.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I feel like that kind of, if this whole sort of Serum bass patch stuff, it sounds so clinical that it's almost like a little bit soulless, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. It kind of depends on what you do with it. I think the sort of music that I make and that you make as well, I think it depends a lot on the character of the bass sounds that you use, sort of.
Right. Yeah.
Because I don't tend to use all like neuro funky filter modulation and that sort of thing. Like things move around. Like there's things have character because they sound kind of old and shitty and authentic, basically, which is kind of the thing I tend to go for.
Yeah.
Whereas someone like, to pick a very, I don't know, obvious example is Skrillex, who does like super interesting stuff with the sounds he makes, but I think he'd be pretty annoyed with having to work with a synth like this CS80,
Totally.
right? Because
Yeah.
it's not very flexible, and you can't make the super clean, like clinical sounds with it that he has to make in order to get that sound that he.
And I think it's also volume as well. It's like you can make it louder if it's not full of artifacts and it's and it's cleaner. You can then
Yeah.
turn it up more and
You
compress
can
it
also
more.
use OTT for that.
Yeah, well, exactly. And it's like, but what if I don't want everything to be like squashed in my face? What if I do like a bit of reverb and I do like a bit of like, you know, sort of, I don't know, character and roominess to stuff.
Yeah.
But I guess that's what the venue's for, right? Put speakers in an untreated room. There's your reverb.
Yeah. Super Zero says, didn't OTT start as an Ableton preset? Yeah, that's what I use. Like I just chucked that multiband dynamics preset called OTT on everything that I feel that needs it, which is everything.
Mm. Oh man, the chat room's making some points and I'm missing a lot of them. What's the point of putting 60? Hi Jabru, how's it going? Um, okay, so he says, what's the point of putting 6 dB at 800 hertz on a sound? You might well have another sound going in later that has stacks of 800 to spare.
Yeah, which is
Is that what we were saying about like leaving the EQing until later?
yeah, just being confident enough that you'll fix it.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, correct us if we're wrong, Jabru, but that
yeah.
right. Yeah.
I mean, also like we've been shitting on Serum a bit, and I don't think it's fair because
Oh, I don't mean to shit on Serum at all.
yeah, no, exactly.
I love wavetable synthesis. I just feel like it has its place, and I don't think that place is in a lot of my music.
Yeah, and I think for me it's like, um, like you were saying about adding characters to stuff and making stuff a bit grainy and a bit lo-fi and a bit more sort of random, I guess, in terms of like like what the cassette tape thing does, and it just like adds little like judders and spits and whatever. I think that because we would do that, we'd end up doing a lot of that to something like if we had a Serum patch, we'd end up dirtying it up anyway. So why not just start with a dirtier sound in the first place?
Right.
So, but yeah, it's a lot to do with genres as well. And yeah, so what do you have like a certain way of starting a project, or do you? Because I remember there was like years ago I was reading. Do you remember Knowledge Mag?
Yes.
And I was sort of like hitting. I didn't really know what I was doing. I was using Reason, and I was like, messing with Maelstrom. I think it was the synth in Reason, and various sample pack drums and stuff. And I didn't really know how to go about starting a track.
Right.
And I read an interview with Hype, and he was like, just load in a drum break and go from there. It's like,
right,
yeah, I guess. And then so I started doing that, and then I realized, well, actually you could start a track in all kinds of ways, but obviously certain people have go-to processes.
Mm-hmm.
And do you have like a specific way of starting, or do you just sort of like chuck something in and see what happens?
So I never start with an empty project. I have this
The blank
template.
right.
Is I have everything set up so I have a bus with multiple channels in it, or a group with multiple channels in it. One is there's drums, percussion, bass, synths, and effects. So and then under the drums, in the drums group, is like a kick, and then a place for a kick layer, and then a snare 1, snare 2, snare 3. that sort of thing. So it sort of becomes a fill in the blanks kind of thing when I start. So I always have a place for everything. So it's become kind of um, I always used to start with the drums or maybe with a sample, and now I just start with anything that sort of sounded inspiring when I go through sounds or when I have an idea because I know I have a place for it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I, and I do most of my stuff in audio anyway. I don't use a lot of MIDI unless it's bass lines, melodies, pads, that kind of thing. But most of the stuff that actually has a lot of the character is all audio. So I have all of the audio tracks at the ready, and then when I find a weird zip sound or whatever, and I'm like, I could make a nice effect out of this. I just put it on the channel called FX1 and do everything on it that I want, and then I can
Do
start from there.
Do you not find that, like, if you have a template where you've got sort of, like you say, fill in the blanks type, are you still there? Have you walked off?
No, 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 no.
You still- um,
My cable management failures have
oh, right.
come to
Um,
bite me in the ass.
Because I find, like, I generally will route things as if I, like, when I come to the mixing process, then everything has a place. Um,
Yeah.
but I found that if I start with a template where all of those places are, there I felt like there was a bit of a pressure to fill up all of the gaps. Do you know what I mean? I mean, like, I have to have three snares, and I have to have, this is my piano or my keys bus, so I have to have some keys in this track. Otherwise, there's nothing on the bus, and so that kind of like almost dictated how I was creating, and really, then I kind of decided, well, what if I don't have anything, and just make, then if you want to have a snare, you can have a snare. If you don't want to have a snare at all, you don't need to have a snare, or whatever it is. Like, it just sort of, it freed it up a bit, rather than it being like, this is where your drums go, and it's like, well, what if I'm making an ambient piece and I don't have any drums? Do you know what I mean? That kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. Well, my template is just like it's expansive enough where there's room for everything, but I never feel pressured to add a certain thing. Like, um, I just need to set my entire environment up so that I have as few choices to make as possible, or else
Yeah,
I'll just lose focus. I wouldn't make any music.
it's the blank canvas, sort of. Yeah, that writer's block that you get if you're like an artist and you're staring at that blank canvas and you've got no. It's
Yeah,
like, where do I start with this? Yeah.
that is a thing. I don't really have that problem as much as I have the potential problem of having a kick and a snare, and then maybe adding a bass line, maybe adding a sample or whatever, and then forgetting everything else I could do, and then having to think about it for a couple of minutes, and then I just lose all the flow. And now I can sort of everything is color coded as well,
Right.
so I sort of automatically fill in the blanks. I don't really fill in the blanks, but I see that there are blanks to be filled, and then I can choose which one to fill.
And it'll give you little sort of like prods of inspiration. Be like, well, you could add this. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
like there's something missing in the yellow bit, sort of.
Right.
There's something my brain picks up, and then that is because there is a sort of a in the call and answer baseline sort of dynamic. There is a call or sort of a loop, but there's no answer. So
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
oh, that's the bit that's missing in the
Yeah.
yellow. So let's focus on the yellow for now. That really helps me make a lot of music, and I don't really feel all that pressure to work a certain way, which I realize is a thing that could happen with templates. But I've kept everything. It's expansive, but I've kept it vague enough to be able to um, yeah, to write freely, basically.
Cool. Yeah. Right. Yeah, because I mean, I've sort of there's been times when I've been like mixing projects, and I did have like I see that Jabri says that he uses templates for client mixes, and I sort of went through a phase of that where I was kind of like, okay, I've got kick, snare, hi hat, percussion, all of that routed to a drum bus, then sub bass, then mid bass, then keys and da da da. And that's still generally how I do it, but I feel like, some projects I was given would have like two drum kits with, multiple mics on everything,
Yeah.
and then some program drums. And where do you can't allocate kick, snare, hi-hat to that. Do you know what I mean? Because you've got like three different kicks going on and whatever else. So I then started going, okay, well, that's in my head, that's the idea of what the template would be,
Hmm.
but it was actually turned out to be quicker to do it from scratch each time rather than get a project and realize it doesn't fit my mix template and then have to like mess around rerouting stuff.
Right. Well, I mean, that sounds like it's a much easier way of working than to have a template that doesn't work for you, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I think it's different for everyone, and everyone's got other ways of working. But yeah, that sort of trial and error, really. But I find, and that was another thing with I kind of got it from live engineering as well. Like every gig that we would turn up to, the in-house engineer would say, "Do you have a sort of pre-made saved patch list for this desk?" And because every desk in the early days, every desk was completely different.
Hmm.
Some were like little 8-channel crap things that I had to like scroll through like multiple pages of 8 channels to try and like work out the mix. I think we had like a 32-channel mix or something.
Right.
So it was tricky, and I had live effects to patch in and everything else. Um, and for like
What
festivals,
a nightmare.
oh, it was a nightmare. And for festivals, like a lot of other engineers would turn up with their little USB dongle, plug it into the digital desk, load up their session. It would all the faders would come up. It'd be exactly perfect for their band because the set doesn't change. The mics don't. They set specific mics. Everything's the same for every gig.
Yeah.
And for me, that just didn't work because none of the mics would be the same. The venues weren't the same, and I was always EQing to the venue as well. So
Yeah.
in an indoor space, you can get away with a lot less bass because it would sort of rattle around the room. And then in an outdoor space, you kind of needed more bass and things like that. And then how much reverb you're putting on versus how roomy the stage is. Anyway, all those sorts of factors would come into play, and I just found that in the end, just starting from scratch each time was just quicker than having, you know, this is the preset, and then actually our routing on this desk is different, so we have to reroute to your patch, and we're not using a 58 on the vocal, we're using a E945 or something like, and then taking steps back from that was almost harder than just going with what I had from going from nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because if you have nothing, then you can if you start from scratch, you can keep track of all the decisions you're making at that point, tailored to that situation, right?
Exactly.
And you don't have to yeah, keep track of every step you take backwards to reverse engineer everything so it works for that situation. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I guess with things like client mixes, what I would do and what I have done is I have that same template, but I would basically delete all the tracks and keep the buses, keep the groups. So it's like drums, percussion, uh, synths would be synths, everything that is sort of mid-range, like synth samples, that sort of thing.
Right.
Everything that's tonal, I guess. And then
All on one bus.
yes, but you can do groups in groups.
Right. Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah.
So bus to
So
bus. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. But I do keep those five main groups for everything I do, just because it just clicks in my head, and
Totally.
yeah, just yeah, the whole visual thing, it corresponds nicely to the way I analyze things when mixing and that kind of thing as well.
Yeah. 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 It's quite. I don't know. Like I found in the early days, I found like the visual stuff a bit of a distraction.
Hmm.
But I think when you sort of come at like it's a bit well for mixing anyway, for like when you when you come at it from more of a like holistic perspective, if you can if you can trust your ears and you're not
Hmm.
just relying on the visual, then the visual is an aid to be like, yes, that ringy frequency you heard, that is this, and you are correct for pointing that out, rather than relying completely on the visual or completely on your ears. um, but yeah, in the early days I found the whole sort of visual stuff a bit of a distraction, of like you could spend an hour color coding everything and naming everything properly, but it's not going to help your mix, sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, again, it sort of comes down to confidence and knowing the limits of what you can do with your ears, basically. I know that when I can't trust my ears, there's no chance I'll trust the visual
Yeah,
either.
yeah, yeah.
So it's always a combination of the two. And then I always use the same like bars based spectrum analyzer, and then a oscilloscope that I know inside and out as well. They're both very simple, but they both show me exactly like the information that I want in the resolution that I want it in.
Right.
So it's all about like when I hear a ringing frequency, I start like searching for it with a big sort of like,
Peak on the yeah.
peak EQ, yeah, and then I can see how it sort of broadly boosts when I get the right frequency in that analyzer, and then I'm like, yeah, that's the right one. Okay, great, that's cool. But I don't focus on all the ringy stuff that my ears think is there because of the listening environment or the like the peculiarities of my headphones,
Of
and
course,
because
yeah.
those don't translate to any peaks on my screen. So, that's it.
So just
Some
ignore that.
time and some focus. Yeah, exactly. And then the big thing with the oscilloscope as well is like I can do a level mix on the spectrum analyzer pretty well. I could probably make my tunes sound sort of 70% of the way there just using the spectrum analyzer, because I sort of know where everything is supposed to hit visually.
Mm.
If like every sound is processed the way that I usually process sounds and that sort of thing. But then there's the dynamics, which like you're not going to be able to hear like a very big peaky sort of transient, right? That's just not how it works. So I look at that and just limit and clip and sort of everything, um, and make sure the dynamics are okay on the oscilloscope. And then if it sounds like it's too much, I'm not going to rely on the information on my screen. I'm going to rely on the information in my ears. And if my ears don't work at that point, then the visual aid doesn't mean shit. And I just,
Yeah.
I'm going to have to sleep on it a bit more. So yeah, I hope that whole thing made sense.
Yeah, no, totally. I another thing I when you were talking about sleeping on it, like I did find that I don't know, like if it was because when I was saying before about having like a really messed up sleep pattern, or at least going to bed really late and then getting up and sort of late, and I found that working on something for a long duration, by the time I've finished working on it, my ears have sort of started to dull quite a lot, and I end up like boosting tops of stuff that then when I come back to it the next day with fresh ears, you're like, whoa, that's a lot brighter than it needs to be, or whatever.
That's half of the reason that I even use the spectrum analyzer is that I can see that I'm completely tiring out my ears even more than they already are by boosting the highs on stuff.
Mm.
Because often when I bust things and I use like I mean something like OTT or maybe like the transient master plugin that tends to boost the highs a lot, and when you do that with a few different elements right after each other, you kind of that whole balance can shift from like the low and high balance. You don't really
Totally.
your ears are easily confused.
Yeah.
So I can always see like, okay, the kick and the bass are at the level that I want them to be, and the hats are 20 dB too loud, and I'll just know that I'll have to turn them down, focus on the things that my ears can translate into,
Mm.
tangible information for my brain, and then, yeah, it helps me know when to stop focusing on.
There's a plugin that I recently got, which is a UAD one, because I found that although I could balance fairly well, generally when you talk about that sort of like, you know, the slope would either be sort of too muffled and bass heavy, but the balance is there between the elements, or it would be too bright and but still like balanced, but just like a bit of a weird EQ. And I found this plugin called the Tilt EQ, and you can
I love.
base yeah, you can rebalance the entire EQ if you stick it on your master out when you're mastering. You can shift between a sort of bass heavy dull mix and a sort of bass light bright mix, and find that sweet spot between the two, using this tilt.
How How is this different from just shelving and putting a shelf EQ on the master?
Well, because the shelf has various, where are you going to end the shelf on the what frequency are you going to stop the shelf?
Right.
How steep a Q factor are you going to put onto the shelf? It's always going to only affect a certain thing, whereas this affects the whole thing one way or the other, which I felt was like a lot more how my ears seemed to get. They either got dull, in which case I was making it too bright, or, back when I used to smoke, they would bring it the other way around. So, and it would just be like, I need more bass. But then also there's the other thing is this, you can change the shape of the mids, because you get that like smile EQ, which is the sort of the loudness button that you used to get with like your Sony Hi-Fi or whatever. It'd be the loudness button, and it would just put a big old smile in the mix, and it would basically boost the very tops and the very bottoms,
Yeah.
and scoop out the mids. And you can do that with this. There's either the tilt or the loud, and if you take the shape off, it turns into a loud sort of brightness filter, and then you tilt it upwards, and that will boost the highs and the lows and keep the mids down.
Wait, you're not routing your mic through Logic, are you? Because it's like
No.
the sound changed when you click
What?
the shape button.
Really? Like that changed? Does that become brighter? No, that can't. No, it can't
Do
do.
anything now. It just pure happenstance.
That's weird. I
Just
mean, like I could do it
make
with.
it more boxy for a second.
So I could, for instance, with the drums. So we can do that, and then is that no? That's not on the master. Sorry, I'll put it on the master, and then you can hear it. So this is normal, and then so that's boosting the very lows and the very tops,
Mm-hmm.
and then if I did like the tilt version, then it's just making it sort of one way or like sort of the other way.
Right. It does sound different from shelving.
Yeah, it's like the whole. It's the entire. Because if you were shelving, you would only be boosting a selection, or you'd be amending a selection of the EQ,
Yeah.
rather than the whole thing as a you know top to bottom.
So does it use some sort of linear phase sort of?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what is. I've not really read into it, but I mean, there is 12 dB or 6 dB per octave filter on it, which I assume is linear phase. So mastering wise, you could roll everything off under 30 hertz and save yourself a bit of and maybe at 20 hertz as 20k as well. But then when you really get into it, like the manly stuff, like the massive passive.
Speaking of manly stuff, shout out to Ozone 5.
Oh yeah, what if they got like manly involved?
No, it's just very manly to use.
Oh right, Zone 5. Well, did you notice that on here?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ozone 5 Dynamics is I use that on every break. And
Oh yeah, yeah. So that's what you use for your multi-band expansion or multi-band compression on the brakes.
multiband gating. Like there's a fan of
Gating, yeah.
this video that he used this.
I saw that. I saw that. Did he use this? Because I thought he was using Fab Filter.
I'm pretty sure he used Ozone Dynamics 5, or I just
Because it's similar to this. I think he used this one,
uh
where you can dial in each band
the thing with
and expand it and compress it.
the thing with Ozone 5 Dynamics is when you could you open that screen? The
The Ozone 5.
yeah. So if you click on
Keeps doing this thing every time I open anything isotope now for some reason.
you have to get a Mac. Just get a Mac, man. It's way easier.
Yeah.
Just click on show all. That'll show all the bands.
Where's that?
Right
Oh yeah, there, yeah.
there you go. And then where actually you can do this. Doesn't matter. If you go into the options below and then click on Dynamics on the tab called Dynamics. There you can choose the number of bands. I always leave that to 4, but then you can the crossover type you can set to, I think, digital is the one. And
Right.
then you can set the Q to like insanely sharp, and it doesn't really change the sound.
So which way is sharp? Oh yeah, that way. 40. Right.
Yeah, I don't know if I have set it to 40. I've set it to pretty high. And then
Doesn't seem to work in the low end, but it definitely works here.
yeah, wait, let me yeah. Uh, 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 have that as a preset, those settings. Yeah, no, it doesn't. It doesn't work
Uh,
that way on the low. Probably because of the phasing stuff. But
It could just be to do with the frequencies per octave, because there's more frequencies in the top end, so you can have a sharper
right.
cut.
Yeah.
Whereas in the lower end, there's a lot more spaced out between the frequencies, or between the notes. Jabru says it picks an axis point. I think he's talking about the tilt EQ. The axis point is literally, I think, is 500 hertz. So then that's the middle of the EQ, and it sort of seesaws either side of 500, or you do the boost where it dips the 500 and then boosts either side of it. But yeah, back to this one. Shall I load in a break or something and we can have a look at it?
Yeah, sure. If you just load up something really noisy like an Amen or a Think.
Yeah, let me just... My hard drive's having a bit of a think. All right, breaks.
Is your main hard drive like a physical old school one?
Yeah, my samples are all on an old, like, clunky mechanical one, but I need to get some more SD. Well, because generally I just save it as a project, so if I use a sample, it's in the project, which will be on my computer. So then I'm not having to constantly load stuff each time. But yeah, I mean, like, God, there's so many. Right, so should we do, like, should we just do the classic Amen?
Yeah, sure.
Just to be... there we go. Right, let's chuck that in here. Alright, and then I'll add this to that channel. No, go away. Go away! I hate it! Right. So, oh, it looks like it's synced to the project tempo. Oh no, just about. It's just slightly slower than 140.
Yeah, it's 138.
Nice. Okay, so, right, what do we do? Where do you set your crossover points?
I always kind of play it by I wanted to say I play it by ear, but I play it by eye mostly.
In terms of where the peaks are on the frequency.
Yeah, kind of, because the kicks and the snares in a sample like the Amen are sort of close together in terms of power, especially if you're going to multi-band gate stuff, then it's sort of finicky. But I would set the first marker somewhere like just where it starts to go.
I guess you can solo each one, right?
Yeah, that's right.
How do you solo it?
At the top and the bottom of each marker that you can drag, there's an F.
Oh yeah.
So there's you can solo and then bypass it as well. So that's really nice.
So would you separate the kick and snare by band?
Yes, as much as possible anyway.
So then if we that's just the kick.
Yeah.
And then if we get the low end of...
Yeah, I'd probably give do a bit of a broader band with the snare, just all the. I tend to listen to sort of the interplay between the actual hits and the noise they produce. So there's a lot of like low end rumble with the snare in the Amen, right?
Yeah.
So this is probably good, and then last marker maybe somewhere in between, like somewhere in the middle of the final band,
like 5k or something.
Something like that, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because you basically your because it's quite a high. For, usually your kick is going to be around 100 to 150 in terms of the peak of it, right?
Yeah.
Um, then the peak of your snare is going to be anywhere from 190 to, if it's really pingy, you could have it up to like 600 hertz in terms of like the tone of the snare.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you've got a real beefy snare, it's going to be like about 190, right? Whereas this one is slightly pitched up, so it's kind of about 210, something like that. And then if you're like the rim shot sort of tone of the snare is around 1K, but that's kind of, you want it half managed by the low mids and half managed by the high mids, because that's going to be your like detail or your like vocal
Yeah.
side of the snare, and then your hats are going to be hitting the peak will be around 5K, but then you want up to 10K and above for the real sort of noise of it,
Yeah.
and
Like
also of the snare as
sizzle.
well. Yeah, the sizzle, the buzz of the snare, everything else was going to be 5K and above.
Yeah.
So yeah, that would make sense then, having that. Um, so then, how do you go about like making this more punchy? Or do you gate it fully, or do you like use expansion? Like what's
I gate it. So what I do is I just solo the low first because
yeah,
that's where most of the
all the rumble is? Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So you can basically everything that is at like those faders that are at -10, you can just
Stick them all
um
the way up,
stick them all the way up. Yeah.
because we're not compressing anything at this stage, so it's just
Right.
gating.
Yeah. So you gate that, and it's at
But we want a
10
ratio.
to 1 now. Yeah, exactly. So I always start at like maybe 2 or 3, and then go up to maybe 10 or something to see what happens and how it reacts. But you can get a really, I mean, it's still a break, so the kick is gonna sound pretty crappy.
So Desi says another new artist in the EDM scene got accused of sexual harassment right now.
Yeah, who is it?
Let us know. Name drop. What would I need to search for online to find visual representation of sound drum placement in the spectrum? Graves. Have you heard of someone called Graves?
I don't
I'm
know.
guessing it's an American EDM artist because I've not heard of them.
Wait a minute. I think I saw something about him earlier this week. Is he the guy that is very bad at the whole BLM thing as well?
Wouldn't surprise me. So frequency spectrum, drum placement. There should be like I've seen it for an orchestra.
With this kind of stuff, it's like I wouldn't say like there's no rules or whatever, because obviously a kick is gonna hit lower than a snare and that kind of thing, and we've been talking about it. I would say get a spectrum analyzer and then put in a track that is very drum heavy, or maybe like
And look at where they're hitting.
yeah, a track that sort of is midway between electronic and sounding like real instruments, maybe like a Komodo track or whatever, and then look at where the kick and the snare and the hats hit and maybe base it on that. That's what I would do. That's what I do, actually.
So there's a few different charts. There's some like EDM based charts as well. This looks fairly straightforward. It's not letting me view it in like a full screen. But yeah, there's a bunch of stuff online you can check out. The thing that I've seen most uh, is this sort of keyboard where you see where you have all of the instruments and their ranges across the keyboard and where they and the frequencies that they hit in terms of that. So that helps for because a symphony orchestra is basically a full frequency range.
I would like to just say that this chart was made by I feel like this was designed by the visual guy from Mercury Rising or something.
Yeah, pretty horrible. But yeah, there's a bunch of stuff online for that. You can just Google that. Yeah, exactly, and the EDM stuff is basically just based on the other stuff anyway. So we've got this gated kick.
Yeah, so it takes a bit getting used to get it so it's sort of natural sounding but still fairly clean. But the thing is, you can easily overdo it, and then there's this on the lower right. There's a presets and bypass buttons, and
Right.
there is a mount slider right there.
There's an amount slider.
Yeah. So.
Oh, there. Yeah.
Yeah. So you can overdo it and then set it to 0 and work your way up from there. What that does do is introduce a lot of rumble back into the mix because it's sort of like just dry wets the whole thing. But yeah, you can do that and just see where you're at and just experiment with the amount and then sort of recalibrate the lows mostly from there. Because I like to have the lows as clean as possible so there's no rumble at all.
Yeah, because you want to make room for your bass and everything.
Yeah. One thing though is that I feel like the labeling of all the different parameters is really counterintuitive. So there's the attack and release. For some reason it says it below the values, and that always fucks with my mind for some reason. I'm used to it now, but
sets it below the values.
No, I mean the labels. So like the word attack and the word release is below the actual values, and that doesn't make sense.
Right. Yeah.
So I used to set the wrong values and the wrong.
Fair enough.
And the wrong fields all the time. But yeah, basically it's this. Just look at where it peaks, set
and then start like
threshold, and yeah.
I mean, you could. Yeah, this is a bit clicky now because I've put the attack quite fast.
Yeah, but if it's clicky, then especially the low end stuff gets masked by the rest, right?
Well, yeah, this is very similar to so if you use the FabFilter one, you can do a similar thing. So if we've got where are our cutoffs? 194.
But you can expand, but you can't gate, right?
Well, you can set an expansion to, the gate is basically doing that. It's if your ratio, if it was like 30-1 gate ratio, then that would be fully gating. But
right,
as it is, it's basically being an expander anyway. So so with this, you can do the expansion. So if we solo that band, and you can set your range all the way but you can also add look ahead. I don't know if you've got look ahead in the ozone one. And you've got oversampling, linear phase.
Okay, so I've two questions because I feel like you might have the answers to this, and I've never really looked it up. So first of all, range and ratio in the Fab Filter plugins. Um,
So
what?
so the range, you could have a ratio of, infinity to 1,
hmm
but if the range is only like, minus 10, it'll only ever go down minus 10 dB. But
Okay.
it'll do it fully to minus 10. It won't sort of have any leeway in between. It will either be on or off. So it's kind of like the ratio is almost the slope. And if it's like a high ratio, then it's a very steep slope down to wherever it is. And then the range is wherever the bottom of that is.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And then you've got the same with like attack and release, but it's not in milliseconds, it's in percentage, which kind of simplifies it on the one hand, but makes it a bit more vague as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, then they've got the knee, so you can have like hard knee. And then set your threshold.
I've only recently started to realize what hard and soft knee actually does. So I'm sort of getting my head around that right now.
I think you can see it easier when you look at this. So the knee is that point there.
Yeah.
So you've got your gate going from there to the bottom. And then that's the point at which the gate cuts off, I guess. And then from the point of the knee upwards is where it starts compressing. And if you've got a really hard knee, then it's like the compressor kicks in, like it's either on or off in terms of the compressor. But then if you've got a soft knee, then the compressor compresses more the louder the signal.
Yeah,
If that makes sense. It's like more gradual.
Yeah, so it when it's a soft knee, it starts compressing as it's approaching the threshold, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And a hard knee
is like okay, now it's past the knee and it goes. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, like it's all very much like splitting hairs, essentially, because you're not going to get a music listener being like, "Oh, I noticed you used quite a hard knee on that compression," but it.
I mean, this is the sort of stuff that I keep saying and that I used to say all the time, but now, especially with cleaning up, like audio that has a lot of character, like the Amen break, and using this sort of stuff to make it sound better, I actually find that understanding better how all this stuff works really gives me an edge, basically.
Totally. Yeah. But I find for me, like, because I don't understand it enough, I end up just doing a little bit. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't want to go too ham with anything, and so I probably could get much better effects if I knew what I was doing. But I'm kind of like, oh, I guess I'll just sort of leave it halfway. That'll be doing something, but not too much if it's wrong. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, that's why that this is an approach that I read this book called Mixing Secrets for the Small Studio,
right?
Which improved my mixes by a million%, basically. And what's
synopsis
to me? I mean,
quick synopsis.
If you want the synopsis, basically, what I learned from the book is the broader thing I learned from the book is turn everything down, then turn everything up one by one, starting with the loudest, most important elements, and then after that use EQ, and then after that use compression for the dynamics, because they're two interconnected but separate processes that you have to understand and can fix most of your stuff with. But then with the compressor, the guy who wrote the book was like, you don't have to understand compression completely. Just start with just setting it to this ratio. Just set it, always have it set at, I don't know, 2 or 3 to 1, and just experiment with the threshold. And at a certain point, you'll start to understand what the audio does as it surpasses the threshold. And then one by one, just start to understand all of those different things those controls on the compressor do, because it's kind of daunting when you first start messing with the compressor and you like, I mean, I guess we're both from a time where a compressor was, when you first started hearing about compression, was sort of this magical thing that would make things sound better, or glue stuff together or whatever.
Yeah.
And now, like 15 years into producing, I finally fully, apart from maybe the knee up until recently, fully understand what a compressor does, and I can envision it, and I know how to use it, when to use it, and the effect it has, because the approach I took was, okay, let's start with setting the threshold, and from that point, the compressor does something to the sound. Okay, let's find out what the other controls do when I change them, what they do to the sound, and then sort of like step by step, you start to understand what a compressor actually does.
Yeah.
And, yeah, that's been really useful.
I think
I had a sorry, go ahead.
there's still for me there's a certain amount of mystery to certain compressors. So like a compressor like this, it's got all the controls, it's got the, ratios, thresholds, knees, whatever, attack release, I understand that.
Yeah.
But then you go and get like a vintage compressor, like an LA2A, and it's just got 2 dials, gain, peak reduction, and you're like,
Boo.
okay, why would I use this? And then you start using it, you're like, oh, but that sounds really nice on certain things, and I don't know why. It's like, for me, the Fairchild, where is it? This one. Like, what is even going on there? Like, what's all this? Like, components and things, and then there's like left latitude calibration, right vertical calibration. I assume it's like mid-side compression, but it's called lat-vert instead of mid-side.
Right.
And then there's all
about number stations, like Soviet spy radio stations. I feel like when they uncover the location of those, this is what they'll find.
totally, yeah. Like there was a, so I went to a writing camp with a bunch of people with Ninja Tune in Wales, a place called Mono Valley, and it's where Andrew Sheps has basically left loads of his old gear, because now he just uses UAD and mixes in the box, so he doesn't need anything. So he basically stores all his old like compressors and his old Neve desk and everything at this studio. It's an amazing studio, but all the stuff's like ancient. And there was an old broadcasting compressor there that's just like one knob. It's just one big dial in the middle, and then you can put like a room mic for it. We recorded some drums there, put the mono room mic through this thing, and just like smashed the crap out of it through this broadcast compressor from like 1960 whatever.
Right.
And it's just like, I don't know what's going on there. Like, it's all like some other world of compression where it just makes stuff sound ridiculous. Because I get it. Like, obviously, if you want punchy compression, use slow attack, fast release, and that lets all the transients through, and it doesn't choke anything, and that's great for drums or just a general sort of glue mix. But like when you've got stuff like time constants, like what is that? You know, like it doesn't.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know, man. I mean, you're from the Doctor Who country, so I think you have more of a chance of understanding what that could possibly mean.
Yeah, I think there's some dark arts involved, man. Definitely. Um, yeah, all that sort of like military grade, like Cold War compressors. Like I don't know what they were doing there.
I mean, I have this. I think it's called Molot compressor, which is just
Yes,
yeah.
I had the same one, and have you got Catalina? Did you? Oh no, because your PC.
Yes.
So what was it? Vladislav Goncharov, this guy, the
It's
Molot.
limiter number 6 is
And
great.
limiter number 6 is great. Look what happens when I try and load up either of those. Cannot be opened because the developer cannot be verified. AKA, because he's a small developer and is giving out his plugins for free, you can't use it. Like,
That sucks.
it's outrageous. It doesn't even give you the option of like, oh, do you trust this developer? It's just like, no,
Right.
we don't recognize him, therefore you can't use it.
But this happens with stuff you bought as well, then.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it hasn't. Not that specific thing doesn't happen, but the wave stuff happens, and I don't really want to do it because it's just going to cause us all kinds of problems.
Right.
But yeah, like I did have, as with probably anyone, I started off a music production fledgling career with a bunch of cracked waves plugins. And then I had certain ones that I were like my go-to. So the Kramer tape and the API were like, the API was just really good for punchy drums. It has this like fold forward compression. So that's another thing that, because I've got the UAD version now, which is another thing that doesn't exist in usual compressors. So the fold forward is basically, from what I can work out, it's where it takes, say if we're looking at this as the compression knee, right? It takes the very top bit, it has like a second knee, which it grabs and makes louder. So it's like an expansion on top of the compression.
Okay, so okay, right. So it's sort of like a transient shaping kind of thing then, right?
Kind of, except it's not it's not shaping the transient. It's just taking the loudest part, which has been compressed, and then grabbing it and making it louder.
Right.
So basically the punch. So for drums, for kicks, snares, it's amazing because you just literally like, you're just getting punchy kick and snare without any messing around with transients. It will keep the if you like the snap, you don't want it any more snappy and you don't want it any more of a tail to the transient. You just like the transient how it is, but you just want it more punchy. The fold forward compression will give you that punch.
Okay.
It's weird, but yeah, like all of these things are like extra. People who are involved in like audio engineering who are building compressors were finding that if we do this, then we achieve this result, and this is a whole different like. Did you hear about the? Do you know the 1176? Which was like a classic compressor.
Don't think so.
This guy.
Oh, I've seen this. I mean,
So
I've seen the plugin.
so the original outboard version of it studio engineers found that if they pressed in, you see the ratio buttons.
Mm-hmm.
So on the software, yeah, you can go 4-1, 8-1, 12-1, 20-1. But they found that if they pushed all of them in at the same time,
Yeah.
it achieved this. It almost hacks it and turns it into super fast attack and release.
It turns it into OTT basically.
Basically, and then the people from Empirical Labs who had built this distressor.
Mm-hmm.
They then created the ELX or EL8X, which had something called British mode. It had like a switch called British mode on it.
Yeah.
Which achieved the same result as pressing in all of the 1176 buttons. So it's almost like you've hacked one compressor, then you've built a new compressor that achieves that's designed around a hacked compressor.
Right.
But yeah, like all of that stuff, just I'm still like, what? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, but I mean that's cool. That's why I've gone back sort of um to being amazed by software emulations of hardware, is that there's just some dumbass shit that some people did in the past that you can now only find in certain plugins because it was so out there and doesn't really match anything that a normal end user would buy, if that makes sense. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I want to buy all these expensive plugins. That's great.
Oh man, sorry. But yeah, no, I mean, but that is like, the thing is, you don't really need any of that stuff. Like, it's kind of, it's like people were tweaking around with stuff in the physical realm
Mm-hmm.
to achieve results that you could probably achieve in an instant with the digital plugins that we have now, if because coding is what it is. It's like,
Yeah.
but then again, it's that thing it's coming back to that thing we were saying before, where it's like, having, but the reason that people love outboard is because of that tube or valve warmth and saturation that you get from having outboard that has tubes in or whatever. But all it's doing is making it less clinical. And so you can have endless amounts of digital plugins, but if they all are very clinical, like what we're doing here with, it's got to have certain amount of milliseconds in this, and I find this ozone almost too clinical, because it's like, what's the difference between a knee of 0.13 and 0.14? Like, is anyone going to know the difference? Yeah. Like, I can't hear it.
That's why I thought of the mixing secrets of the small studio example. Is like, if you just start with setting the threshold somewhere, then at a certain point you'll realize setting the knee to either 1.3 or 1.8 isn't going to do anything. So you might as well just understand sort of how it works, and then
have a rough average. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's continue with this. Super Zero says it's preset on camel fuzz. I had no idea. I never had camel fuzz. Did you ever have camel fuzz?
I think so. Is that the free one? I think so. Yeah,
Not
camel
sure.
fat and camel fuzz, and then something else maybe. But like British mode, I think a lot of amp and cabinet simulations have something called British, which might be what camel fuzz had.
Right. So do you think that was like the super fast attack and release?
No, I think that is just like an amp modeled after a certain sound from the UK from a certain era.
Right. So it's nothing to do with the compression. Um,
Right.
so Jabru has slightly explained the Fairchild to me, which is good. He says the time constant is attack and release combined. Okay, that makes sense. But it's a bit annoying because what if I want slow attack, fast release? But yeah. And he says comes from vinyl stereo cutting. So, right. Trying to
Yes.
use land as efficiently as possible on the lacquer.
So that's the mid side section. So like,
Use a different compressor. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
nice.
I do find though, like when I put, so if I have like a pad or something, and then or some keys, and I put the Fairchild on that channel or on the bus, it just does something to the stereo, and I'm not sure what it's not like it phases anything. It doesn't spread anything more. It's almost as if it's like treating the left channel and the right channel slightly individually, so that
Okay.
you get like more of a like stereo sensation from it. I don't know. I don't know. I haven't really like analyzed it properly, but I do like to use it, especially for something like, if you've got like a vocal and a piano, and you've got your vocal in the middle and you don't want the piano interfering with that, like having that Fairchild just sort of sits it out. It sort of envelops the vocal rather than interfering with it in the middle. But
Right. Okay.
you can do a similar thing with like the mid side EQ. So I don't know if you use Pro Q3, but they've got
No, oh yeah, that's been out for a while,
it's
right?
been out for a while, and it's literally my go-to EQ now. It's just so good for like sculpting. So for instance, like if we put it on the before all of this, and if we just look at the amen. So I could, there's quite a lot of stereo information in the low end. So
Mhm.
if I make a low cut, but just make it a side low cut, then that takes all of the stereo information out from the low end.
Yeah, yeah, I do this a lot with Ableton's EQ8, which is
Is
pretty
that
useful.
similar?
Yeah, it's basically. I think they took a lot from the Pro Q sort of design philosophy, where it's like you can put it in left, right, or in mid side mode, and it's pretty
Yeah.
flexible in that way. But you can't pick like a random node and set that to mid or side. I think you can switch between a mid and a side um, field, basically collection of nodes.
Right. So but the other thing with this is if you have it on different channels. So say, oh god, no, I don't want a Zoom conference. Go away.
Yes.
Um, if you have another Pro Q3 on this channel, say, so I've got
Mhm.
my old. So that's showing the the tape drums, right?
Yeah.
Then you can lay them across each other. So it's showing both of the spectrums, and you can go, okay, well, I've got quite a lot of this frequency in this channel, and that's bunching up here, so I can work out according to the other thing how much to dip this by, and it's quite useful for that. and then obviously you can set it to how you can freeze, like, you know, and then it just stays up there, or you can like have like a different rate to it. Yeah, so like speed, you can have like that, being very fast or really slow. So yeah, it's quite useful for things like that. But yeah, let's get back to cleaning up this break.
Yeah.
So
Let me check time really quickly because I think I'm gonna have to
yeah, you're gonna have to.
pretty soon. Yeah,
Yeah,
because
same.
it's an hour later here, so
Of
it's
course, so
just
it's
about dinner.
good stuff. Well, just quickly run me through this. So we've got our gate. Oh, hang on. Where is it? This one. I'll just leave that stereo low cut on.
Yeah.
And then okay, and then it's gonna do a load of stuff here. Go away. Right. So we've got the gate there.
Yeah. So like, as far as I can hear the low sounds okay now, right?
Yeah.
Like the release is pretty organic as well. So what I then do is I just unsolo this and then solo the next band and do the same thing. And
Okay.
then the main mission of this whole thing is to make it still sound like the original Amen break, but get all that like rumbly stereo sort of noise stuff, get that as gated out as possible, basically.
I've literally just tweaked the wrong frequency.
Yeah,
So
that'll happen.
okay,
Yeah,
that's
this is
fair.
the show all thing is actually pretty nice to have as well. So you kind of know where you're doing shit.
Okay. So yeah, then that's the knee getting a bit bigger, but okay, and then okay, and then we've got this one, and I guess the higher up the spectrum, the less you gate it, because
Yeah.
you want all of those, like, you know,
Want
subtleties.
all the sizzle. Yeah, man. Yeah, because there is a lot of weird, noisy stuff in this band. I feel like that could use a bit of gating,
Mm.
but then the very high end
You kind of want
here as
that
well. Like,
constant, yeah.
if you overdo it, it's just gonna sound like the worst. Like imagine the worst tune Tech Itch has ever made, and then so
Oh, come on, man.
I mean he's made like he's one of the biggest influences on my entire musical
Yeah.
thing. So I can talk about stuff being potentially bad at some point where
Without feeling bad about
right,
cussing and
exactly.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, no, no. So what I mean is like the very dry, choppy, um, gated sort of tech step drums.
Yeah.
But then like there's not even like the sizzle of the highs. It's just like everything is cut off way
Just
too early.
boxy. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
mean to.
That was an era though. I think there was like an era of people being pretty experimental with their EQs.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, some of the like techie, the tech step Dom and Roland stuff as well, like, is a bit like, yeah, are you sure? Um, but yeah. Speaking of which, check this out. Um, I've shown this before, but can you see that?
Wait. Oh wait, I I'm gonna go full screen. I can't read it. It's mirrored as well, I think.
Oh, right. So,
Enos is your favorite brand of floppy disk.
that is one of the original floppy disks from Dom and Roland's The Storm,
Oh yeah.
the original Jungle track. So that was a little present, little lockdown present to myself,
Awesome.
which needs to go up in the studio. Oh, back in the studio when I'm back.
Yeah. He recently put up a bit of stuff that he found in his in some old boxes or something,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. That's one of those.
Nice.
I had to have it. I mean, I was hoping, I was like holding out for imagination, but I think there was quite a lot of people going for that one, and I've got a lot of old Don Roland bits, and the Storm was definitely up there in terms of formative years of, you know, pretending to do work, but while having like one headphone going through my sleeve and sort of just leaning on the desk like that, and we're like, yeah, I'm doing lots of work.
Oh, yes. Oh, I did so much of that. I mean, I wasn't doing work. I was pretending to listen to teachers, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. Like, you know, when you're in the classroom and it's sort of like, where's that noise coming from? Like, what noise? I can't hear anything. With the tape player going, like, it was like back in the cassette tape days. And I remember when everything moved to CDs, and you just couldn't listen to anything properly because it just kept jogging. Anytime you were walking, it would just be like, oh, that's the CD stopped, because the laser was so like.
Yeah, and then you got these Discman players which had shock protection up to 30 seconds, and it was never up to 30 seconds.
No, it's nonsense. And all it meant was if you jumped up and down, 30 seconds later the disc would skip. It's like,
Yeah.
it's still skipping.
Either that or like we can't promise it won't skip, but it won't skip for at least 30 seconds at one time.
Yeah. Yeah, that was weird. But then the mini disc came around and it was incredible. I had so many mini discs and you could record to them, and it was just like having a cassette player but like way higher quality, and you could like record loads of stuff. I had like 4 hours of on one mini disc. It was,
Yeah, I completely missed the mini disc era. I don't know
yeah.
why.
I lost all of my mini discs. I left them in a bag on a train.
Oh no.
And got off the train and was like, oh no. Yeah, it was basically a lot of my own mixtapes, so probably for the best. But yeah, right. So this, if we. You could probably like compress it a little bit as well, maybe. At the top.
What I do with, there's lots of breaks that have like excellent low and mid, like where it's really nicely compressed, and then the highs are very peaky and transient.
Yeah.
I gate it, and then I limit that as well usually.
Right.
It's kind of finicky because it's not like the whole fader is kind of at a low resolution, I feel like.
Okay, well we'll go with that, and then this top. Are we gating that at all? You just keep that.
I mostly just keep that, yeah.
Keep that as it is. So now. I mean, I might have gone a bit too far.
Right, exactly. But then you can adjust that mount slider and then sort of base some new values on that.
I'm gonna see how far I can go with these tops as well. Actually, see if I can. Okay. It's almost like I used to chop up my brakes in a thing called Recycle. Do you
Yes.
remember that? And then you could export that into a sampler in Logic,
Yeah.
and then you.
Good luck using RX2 files now, by the way.
Oh yeah, does it not work?
No, not really. Like I have loads of them, and
Damn.
I mean,
But the new Logic sampler is pretty cool. Um, you can literally just drag in. So say I take the same break, and then oh it's computer's having a think. Okay, and then if you drag it to the side here, you can turn it into. You can stick it in the quick sampler, and it'll slice everything up for you ready.
oh, that's very accurate.
Yeah,
Nice.
and then you can just play it.
Yeah, that's the thing. Since I've started using Renoise, I just put a slice marker at every kick and every snare, maybe at like the start of like a ghost snare shuffle kind of thing.
Right.
And individual hits, I always go way too far with those and make it sound overly clinical, and basically what we're doing with the gate right now.
Yeah. So that's the other thing with this is you can just get rid of some of the markers if you don't want them.
Yeah.
And then you can sort of trigger as long as you want. But then that was the other thing. That was the thing that this reminded me of, is sort of loading a beat into a sampler, having it all chopped up, and then making the sustain and the decay like really tight, so then it would sound like that.
Yep. I mean, that is what some of that old weird tech step sounded like, right?
Yeah.
We can process all of the individual hits now, so
Yeah.
we might as well not use breaks. It's great.
Yeah.
It's the year 1999 and the future is now.
Yeah. I mean, I could probably like go even more extreme and then just make it like really techy.
Oh yeah, and then if you just just smash that into a saturator. Maybe some.
You can kind of hear the like wolf, like the attack kind of speeds varying in the frequencies.
Yeah.
Well, and then stick it in through a saturator.
Yeah, just really overdo it.
I've got this little radiator, the sound toys one. It's really good. That is brutal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's wicked. And then obviously you can sort of chill those out a bit. I guess you do the amount. You just reduce the amount, right?
Yeah, and then usually.
So then that's off, and then.
Yeah. And then what I do usually is I turn down the amount and then sort of listen to that, listen to which bands need to sort of be adjusted for that vibe to work with the amount slider in the middle, and then put it back into the middle and just go easier on the on all the individual bands, and then at a certain point you get the whole thing, but with all the control of the individual bands instead of like dialing everything in and then sort of making it vague again with the amount slider.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. And then I guess like you're kind of you sort of go back to go forward sort of thing. You sort of tighten up the brake to then distort it or saturate it to then bring out some of the detail again
Yeah, yeah, that's it. Yeah. Actually,
whilst
I
keeping it
mean,
punchy. Yeah.
the OTT thing is kind of a joke, I guess, but I love using something like OTT or maybe like Softtube's saturation knob or whatever, and with some compression to get that sort of that lowered noise in between the hits, get that up to the level where I want it. Because if you do that with the brake without gating it first, then you just get
You
like
just
this
get
flat
just
mess.
endless noise. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And then you're relying on, like, what I was doing before was relying on the punch of the layers. So, like, adding a kick and a snare punchy layer underneath
Yeah,
to be the punch, and then distorting the brake. But actually, if you gate the brake first, then distort it, you don't need those additional layers, and
right. Yeah,
you're not creating any phase issues or anything like that.
yeah,
Yeah, that's really cool, man.
yeah. And you can get like the most power and like transient
Efficiency. Yeah.
efficiency, yeah, from the original sound. So it like sounds like the actual brake, but better,
Yeah,
basically.
yeah, yeah, yeah. What? Better? Better than the Amen? Better than the original Amen? Sacrilege. Wicked, man. Well, yeah, I guess we should probably call it because we both need to eat. But it's been really, really good chatting, man. It's been a while since
Yeah.
we had a catch up.
Yeah,
Um,
let's just do this again soon.
Sure,
Like,
man. Whenever you're up for it. I do a lot of live streams. I don't know if you've had a look at the Twitch or the YouTube, but I'm
yeah.
constantly streaming nonsense. Whatever I'm doing, I've been making like orchestral, cinematic, library music recently, and I've been streaming that. Using a lot of like
Yeah.
Spitfire stuff, but
Yeah, I saw you using some Spitfire stuff. I saw you doing some stuff on Twitter, I think, on Periscope.
right.
I locked in for like 2 seconds, and then my
Uh,
girlfriend told me to focus on whatever we were doing. But
I get that all the
but yeah, yeah,
time.
yeah.
Yeah.
I've been seeing streams around. So yeah, let's just do this whenever we feel like it. Maybe.
Sure, man. Whenever you're free. I mean, again, like, we had the Google Chrome remote desktop. So I mean, I could have left you to do all of the dialing in of stuff,
Yeah.
and you could have loaded up whatever you wanted on here. So I guess that works the other way as well. So maybe we should do a little collab effort. I've had a few where I've had like vocalists who have, but the latency is too much to record directly. So they generally like go away for it. We discuss it. We talk about what they've done or whatever, and then they go away for half an hour and record a new thing and then send it, and then I put it in and we work on it that way. But I think as two producers, we should be able to like you know drag stuff around and create things remotely,
Yeah. Yeah. Let's
if you're up for it.
do that as soon as possible. Yeah, absolutely.
Sure. Well, yeah. Let's do that. Like, well, whenever you're ready, let me know, and we'll put an afternoon in.
Yeah,
That should be good.
absolutely. Cool. Hey, I'll talk to you soon and have a good evening.
Awesome, man. Nice one.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, man. Right.
No worries.
All right.
See you.
All right.
Bye bye. So TMSV there. Check out his. I think he's on Bandcamp. TMSV Bandcamp probably. He's done a lot of self releases. Not Badcamp. So just type TMSV, and there he is. So it's tmsv.bandcamp.com, and he's got a load of releases up on there. So yeah, check him out, and thanks for locking in. And I imagine I'll be probably back on, if not tomorrow, then I'll be back streaming next week. All right, cheers.